Chapter 76. Zhuangzi was alarmed when he felt the blue light approaching his body. In a panic, he dodged and the star's sword pellet fell mercilessly, cutting the flying boat he was on into two. Stunned for a moment, he shouted angrily, "Zhang Yan, how dare you? Don't you know I'm—" Zhang Yan wouldn't waste time talking to him. He pointed with his finger and the sword pellet spun in the air, slashing over again. Seeing Zhang Yan's ice-cold eyes, Zhuangzi was terrified. He didn't have time to think and hurriedly formed a spell. With a hiss, a white sword pellet also rushed up and flew in the air. He leaped forward again, wanting to block it. Who knew that just as the two were about to collide, the star's sword pellet seemed to have a mind of its own. It suddenly spun and circled around. Zhuangzi couldn't help turning pale with fright. He hurriedly twisted his body to retreat, desperately urging his sword pellet to tangle with it. However, once Zhang Yan's high-layered waves, sword force was unleashed, how could it be so easy to block it? The sword pellet spun repeatedly in the air. When the aura overlapped to 24, the surrounding star fragments crackled and exploded. The blue light was already blazing like a flame, its momentum extremely terrifying. Zhuangzi blocked left and right, exhausted from running for his life. Seeing that he had no more strength left, Zhang Yan no longer hesitated. He activated his spell, and the sword pellet suddenly fell. With a clang, it knocked on the opponent's sword pellet. This ordinary sword pellet was only made of gold and white, so how could it withstand the impact of the star essence sand? It was like a taut zither string being snapped, instantly exploding. The sword pellet that was connected to his mind was broken, and Zhuangzi spat out a mouthful of blood. Before he could do anything, he saw the blue light rushing towards him without stopping. In his fright, he let out a wild roar and a small square gray flag flew out from his body. He grabbed the flagpole and unfolded it in the wind. The flag's surface billowed and instantly grew several times bigger. Like a dark cloud, it covered his body and blocked the line of sight between the two of them. Zhang Yan scoffed coldly and pointed with his finger. Another green light shot out from his sleeve, and its speed was actually not inferior to the sword pill. With a poochie sound, the green light pierced through the flag. With a blood-curdling scream and a rain of blood, Zhuangzi's right hand, which was holding the flag, was chopped off. His heart trembled and he didn't dare to stay any longer. With his left hand covering the injured part, he turned around and fled. Before he could run far, a streak of green light caught up to him. It pierced through his back and exited through his abdomen. He let out a muffled groan and fell from the sky. Zhang Yan caught up to him, grabbed him, and knocked him unconscious. He carried him back to the island and threw him on the ground. He said to Luo Xiao, "Use some pills to keep him alive. Don't let him die. I have other uses for him." Luo Xiao was surprised. "Master, is this person really a fake?" Zhang Yan shook his head and said with a smile, "This person must be Zhuang Bufan's subordinate. Otherwise, how could he have such guts?" What? Luo Xiao was shocked. Then if Master captures him, won't Zhuang Bufan harm Master? That day, when she saw Zhuang Bufan's supernatural power, she was also shocked. With a wave of the great overarching heavenly sleeves, it covered the sky and covered the earth. It gave people a feeling that it was unstoppable and unavoidable. Zhang Yan smiled lightly and said, "You don't have to worry. I naturally have my reasons for capturing him. Although Zhuang Bufan's cultivation is extraordinary, he still has to follow the rules of the sect. How can I allow him to do as he pleases? Watch how I deal with him." Luo Xiao trusted Zhang Yan very much, so when she heard this, her heart calmed down. Zhang Yan calmly returned to his cave dwelling and wrote a letter. He then rolled it up and stuffed it into the hilt of the Howling Lake golden sword. Holding it in his hand, he chanted a spell and a golden light soared into the sky, heading towards the direction of the Danding courtyard. In the time it took to eat a meal, the golden sword returned. He opened the letter and read it. He then looked into the distance and sneered, "Zhuang Bufan, I have nothing to do with you. But since you came knocking on my door, how can I not return the favor?" He stood up and changed into the Taoist robe of a true disciple. He then summoned Luo Xiao and gave her a few instructions. Then he released the flying ship and carried the unconscious Zhuang Bufan to the Zhengqin courtyard. The Zhengqin courtyard was located on one of the 9 peaks of the mystic tortoise continent, the Heavenly Prisoner Peak. Outside the courtyard, there were 7 giant tablets with the rules of the Feng Tsang faction engraved on them. On each tablet, there was a Bayan staring at the passers-by. There was no jade or gold in front of the courtyard gate, only a huge blue stone that extended from the empty space in front of the courtyard into the inner hall. At the gate, there were 2 watchtowers with 7 killing swords hanging on each eave. On the left and right of the watchtowers, there was a drum and a gong, one for growth and the other for death. The closer Zhang Yan got, the more he felt that the entire mountain was shrouded by a solemn and murderous aura. From afar, he controlled the boat to descend from the clouds and woke Zhuang Bufan up. He then carried him towards the mountain gate. When Zhuang Bufan woke up, he was surprised to find himself in front of the Zhengqin courtyard. He shouted, "Zhang Yan, I am the deacon of the Zhengqin courtyard, a disciple of Vice-Chancellor Zhuang. How dare you hurt me? You lawless disciple, you are insolent. You are unforgivable. I will report this to Vice-Chancellor Zhuang and have your cultivation crippled." Zhang Yan ignored his words and carried him all the way to the front of the Zhengqin courtyard gate. He then threw Zhuang Bufan on the ground and let him scream and scream. There were more than 100 strong men with golden axes standing on both sides of the gate. After hearing Zhuang Bufan's words, everyone looked at Zhang Yan with a strange expression. This person was really daring. After injuring a deacon, he still dared to come to the Zhengqin courtyard and show off his strength? However, Zhang Yan's expression was calm, as if he didn't care. He must have something to rely on. No one dared to act rashly without orders. For a moment, apart from Zhuang Bufan's cursing, no one dared to move. The disciples passing by all raised their eyebrows, each of them dumbfounded. Most of them were here to receive their punishment. Which one of them wasn't trembling with fear and treading on thin ice? None of them were like Zhang Yan, who dared to grab a deacon of the Zhengqin courtyard and throw him in front of the gate. They couldn't help but stop and watch. One of the deacon disciples saw that the situation wasn't good and hurriedly went to report. After about the time it took for a stick of incense to burn, a middle-aged cultivator walked out. This person was broad-boned and had a round face. His hair was combed into a bun and he didn't wear a crown. When he saw Zhang Yan's direct disciple robes, he frowned slightly. His gaze then fell on Zhuang Bufan. He saw that Zhuang Bufan was covered in blood and had lost an arm. He was clearly heavily injured. His frown deepened and he looked at Zhang Yan. Why are you making a ruckus in front of the Zhengqin courtyard? Before Zhang Yan could reply, Zhuang Bufan, who was lying on the ground, began to shout, "Vice Monastery Head Pan, my name is Zhuang Bufan. I am a deacon under Vice Monastery Head Zhuang. This person's name is Zhang Yan. Today, I received orders to read Vice Monastery Head Zhuang's decree to purge this person of all the beautiful concubines on the island. Who would have thought that not only would he not listen to my orders, he would even cut off my arm? I ask Vice Monastery Head Pan to give me justice." Vice Monastery Head Pan solemnly asked, "You say you are a deacon of the Upright Purity Courtyard. What proof do you have?" Zhuang Bufan hurriedly said, "I have a talisman on me as proof. There are also people in the courtyard who recognize this disciple." Vice Monastery Head Pan ordered the deacon disciple beside him, "Go bring the talisman over." The deacon disciple hurriedly came forward and retrieved the talisman from Zhuang Bufan's body before handing it over to Vice Monastery Head Pan. After Vice Monastery Head Pan inspected the talisman, he called another disciple over to confirm that Zhuang Bufan was indeed Zhuang Bufan's disciple. His gaze swept over Zhang Yan. "You have injured my Upright Purity Courtyard's disciple. What else do you have to say?" Zhang Yan was not the slightest bit afraid. He pointed at Zhuang Bufan and said, "Vice Monastery Head Pan, since this person is a disciple of the Upright Purity Courtyard, then I would like to ask, is his name on the courtyard's register?" Vice Monastery Head Pan's expression changed when he heard this. His lips trembled as if he wanted to say something, but he couldn't open his mouth. Zhang Yan faintly smiled. He had guessed correctly. This loophole was something that even the people of the upright purity courtyard would unconsciously overlook. Within the Dark Azure sect, each courtyard's register didn't have many positions. Most of the courtyards only had a dozen or so people, such as the monastery head, pavilion head, and deacon. This was because the moment they received the position, the sect would bestow them with spirit shells, divine sand, pills, and so on. Moreover, the amount was not small, so these positions were like pieces of juicy meat. They had long since been carved up by the aristocratic families and the disciples. Those who received the position all had great backgrounds. The monastery heads couldn't order them around, but they were powerless to change it, so they could only arrange for other people to handle matters for them. Over the past 100 years, everyone had become accustomed to this. But although these people claimed to hold positions in the courtyard, in reality, it was only in name. For example, Zhang Yan himself was the overseer of the Danding Institute, but this was only a nominal position with no real power. His name was not recorded in the records, so it was impossible for him to receive any more rewards from the sect. His authority came from Zhou Changju, and if Zhou Changju were to leave, his status would be useless. According to the sect's rules, Zhuang Yi was just Zhuang Bufan's subordinate, so he didn't have the right to call himself a deacon of the upright purity courtyard. The reason he was so overbearing was because he relied on Zhuang Bufan's influence. But once the skin was torn off, they were actually nothing. Zhang Yan coldly said, "The upright purity courtyard means to cleanse the roots of the sect. This person is clearly not a deacon of the upright purity courtyard, so why would he use this name? And he even dares to threaten a direct disciple. It's clearly Zhuang Bufan who is conniving behind the scenes to seek personal benefits. As a vice monastery head, if Zhuang Bufan isn't upright himself, how can he be upright?" Seeing Zhang Yan's accusations being placed on him one by one, assistant monastery head Pan's expression changed from shock to surprise. Finally, a faint smile appeared at the corners of his mouth. He could see that today, Zhang Yan had captured Zhuang Yi and thrown him in front of the upright purity courtyard. It was clear that he wanted to blow up the matter. Ruining Zhuang Bufan's reputation was secondary, but more importantly, he wanted to give others an excuse to attack Zhuang Bufan. The upright purity courtyard's sect master had a lot of authority, and the vice monastery head position had always been fought over. Zhuang Bufan had only been in this position for a few days, and his position wasn't stable yet. There were many people who had their eyes on him, and once someone had something on him, he would definitely be attacked. How could he hold this position for long? Vice monastery head Pan coldly laughed in his heart. "Zhuang Bufan, Zhuang Bufan, you've been bossing people around the moment you arrived, treating us like we're nothing. Who would have thought that this day would come?" Chapter 77. 3 days later, Danding Yard's headmaster, Zhou Changju, met with the headmaster and said that his disciple, Zhang Yan, kept a batch of enchantresses, which were bought from the Shui kingdom and given to him as a gift. Zhuang Bufan did not investigate the inside story and made a rash decision. He was too impetuous. Sun Jinren also complained, "Every family keeps enchantresses and does not violate the rules of the school. Zhuang Bufan's action has stirred up trouble for no reason." As soon as the two of them spoke, the matter became a hot topic. Zhuang Bufan was called in by Immortal Yen and reprimanded. Later, he went to the headmaster and begged for forgiveness. He barely managed to keep his position as the vice headmaster of the Zhengqing Yard, but he did not dare to mention the matter of cleaning up the school's atmosphere. As for the instigator, Zhang Yan, no one paid attention to him. He cultivated peacefully in his abode. In his opinion, Zhuang Bufan was too impatient. He acted as soon as he became the vice headmaster. Even if he did not target him, the slightest mistake could easily be used against him. In fact, sitting in Zhuang Bufan's position was the safest choice. He looked outside the Spirit Page Island. At this moment, the setting sun was shining brightly, the sky and water seemed to be heavily smeared by a brush dipped in cinnabar. He suddenly remembered that today was the last day of his appointment with the Flood Dragon. He called Luo Xiao, walked out of the cave and walked towards the riverbank. Walking along the stream, in the time it took to eat a meal, he arrived at the edge of the inner river where the water splashed. Looking around, he chuckled and said, "You don't need to hide, I know you're here. Have you considered what I said 3 days ago? I'm suffocated. I'm suffocated." The golden Jiao dragon's head popped out of the water. After not seeing him for a few days, he could already speak. However, his mouth was full of complaints. "There are no big fishes or insects on your island. You only eat tasteless pills every day. Plus, this place is so narrow that I can't even move around. It's really hard to bear." Zhang Yan smiled playfully and said, "I can let you go, but you have to recognize me as your master." The golden flood dragon arched its back and said unwillingly, "Why should I recognize you as my master? Your cultivation is not high. If I want to recognize a master, I might as well recognize a cultivator with a high cultivation. Like the person who brought you back that day." "You mean Zhuang Bufan? You sure are ambitious." Hearing him belittle his cultivation, Zhang Yan was not angry at all. Instead, he felt a sense of heroism. Although my current cultivation is inferior to him, it doesn't mean that I will be inferior to him in the future. Within 100 years, I will definitely catch up to him. The golden flood dragon rolled its eyes and said, "Then why don't we make a bet? If you can defeat this person in 100 years, I will recognize you as my master. How about it?" Zhang Yan pointed his finger at the flood dragon and said with a smile, "What a cunning flood dragon. Do you really think that I will be fooled? Even if I can defeat it in the future, do you think that I will raise you for 100 years in vain? You only know how to take advantage of others and are unwilling to suffer losses. Serves you right for failing to transform." The golden flood dragon said resentfully, "If I didn't find a way out early, I would have been captured and died. What's the point of passing this tribulation?" Zhang Yan asked with interest, "Oh? Captured by who?" The golden flood dragon seemed to realize that it had let the cat out of the bag and quickly shut its mouth. Zhang Yan smiled and didn't pursue the matter. Instead, he pointed at Luo Xiao who was standing beside him and said, "Look at this fellow Taoist beside me. She is also a Yao cultivator. I can see that your qi, blood, and yuan qi are very beneficial to her. If she eats you, her cultivation will definitely improve." The golden flood dragon looked at Luo Xiao and a trace of panic flashed in its eyes. Zhang Yan saw the golden flood dragon's eyes darting around, but it didn't say anything. So, he waved his sleeve and said, "Fellow Taoist Luo, since he refuses to recognize me as his master, then forget it. You can do whatever you want to him." After saying that, he pretended to leave. Luo Xiao gracefully bowed and said, "Thank you, master." Seeing that Zhang Yan was about to leave and Luo Xiao's cold gaze, the golden flood dragon couldn't help but become anxious and said, "Don't go, don't go. I'll recognize you as my master, I'll recognize you as my master." Zhang Yan stopped and thought it was funny. This Yao dragon was so cunning, but he didn't expect it to be so spineless. It softened after a little threat. Just as he was about to turn around, he heard someone say from the sky, "Is senior brother Zhang here? I've come to visit." When the golden flood dragon heard this, it buried its head into the water and disappeared. Seeing its appearance, Zhang Yan snorted and said, "You can hide the first time, but you can't hide forever." The golden flood dragon murmured in the water, "Today we have wine, today we get drunk. Every moment we can drag is the moment we get." Zhang Yan was about to take out a talisman to open the restriction when he heard the golden flood dragon's words. This golden flood dragon's temperament was quite interesting. Since it couldn't escape from here, there was no need to rush to force it. Xie Zongyuan's flying ship slowly descended from the sky, laughing loudly. "Senior brother Zhang, you've defeated Zhuang Bufan. Good, the Xie admires you." Zhang Yan cupped his fists and said, "Thank you, senior brother Xie, for your praise." Zhang Yan's actions were merely taking advantage of the situation. At this time, a young cultivator standing next to Xie Zongyuan said, "What a great taking advantage of the situation. The sects have been fighting with the Three Lakes for many years. Who doesn't have a few beauties to keep up appearances? If Zhuang Bufan is allowed to do as he pleases, it will only cause the heavens to be angry. Senior brother Zhang has saved him this time." Zhang Yan couldn't help but take a serious look at this person. This person was also at the 3rd level of clear qi. his face was round, his lips were red, his skin was white like jade, and his fingers were slender and plump like a married woman's. He actually had the appearance of a man and a woman. If it wasn't for his powerful voice, broad shoulders, and a knot in his throat, he would have mistaken him for a beauty. I wonder who is beside Brother Xie. Xie Zongyun pulled the person beside him over and introduced, "This is Lu Tao, Senior Brother Lu. He cultivates at Ing Celestial Island and is also a free and unfettered guest." Lu Tao cupped his fists and said, "I've long admired Senior Brother Zhang's great name. Don't listen to Senior Brother Xie's nonsense. What free and unfettered guest? I came from the cold spectrum, and only people like Senior Brother Xie treat me as someone important." Xie Zongyuan said unhappily, "What cold spectrum clan? Although I'm a member of the Xie clan, I've never judged people by their status, and I've never looked down on the heroes of the world." Lu Tao smiled and said, "It's a slip of the tongue, junior brother." After exchanging a few polite words with the two, Zhang Yan led them into the cave residence to entertain them. He still had a lot of fine wine that he had brought from Wang Pan's place. He usually didn't drink it, so it was just right to serve it to the two. He also ordered the beauty Yuji to catch over 100 inkstone chickens. These Yuji had all received training in the water country and were used to serving people. They naturally knew the way of cooking. Seeing that the sky was gradually darkening, Zhang Yan felt excited and ordered dozens of strong men to push a pleasure boat into the great marsh. They loaded all the fine wine onto the boat and went for a ride with the two of them to admire the moon. The inkstone chickens were delicious to begin with, and after being roasted by Yuji, the two ate heartily. At this moment, Xie Zongyuan didn't have the slightest demeanor of a disciple of a noble clan. He was somewhat unrestrained as he said loudly, "Delightful, delightful. Normally, I can't taste such delicacies without restraint. It looks like I'll have to visit Senior Brother Zhang more often." Lu Tao also nodded and said, "This delicacy makes today's trip worth it." Zhang Yan raised his cup and said, "If the two of you can come often, that would be Zhang Yan's fortune. Come, let's drink." The three of them raised their cups and drank it all in one gulp. After putting down their cups, the three of them felt a little closer to each other. After chatting for a while, Lu Tao suddenly said, "I wonder if the two senior brothers have heard that the sect master is going to exterminate the 3 lakes demonic beasts within half a year?" "That's right." Xie Zongyuan nodded and put down his cup. He said, "I've also heard this rumor. It said that the sect master is planning something big and is anxious to expand the sect's strength. If our generation's disciples make great contributions in this battle, they might even be rewarded with a paradise. Moreover, in the 3 lakes, other than the rare divine sand and herbs of our Dark Azure sect, there are also 5 deep lake shell farms. It said that if a disciple can behead any one of the 3 demon lords, the sect master will allow him to establish a residence outside the sect." Lu Tao's eyes twinkled as he played with the cup in his hand. He said, "Establishing a residence outside the sect? If it's really like this, then it's worth a gamble." Xie Zongyuan sighed and said, "Unfortunately, we are only at the 3rd level of the clear Qi realm. Even if we can condense the mystic light seed in 1 or 2 months, we won't be able to reach the mystic light realm in a year and a half. Going to battle is just sending us to our deaths." Lu Tao, however, smiled deeply and said, "That might not be the case. If the 2 senior brothers are interested, I have a way." Zhang Yan smiled and didn't say anything. Xie Zongyuan, however, said, "If Senior Brother Long knows something, there's no harm in saying it." Lu Tao slowly said, "Have the 2 of you heard of the Ci Demon Cave in our sect?" Xie Zongyuan thought for a while and said, "I've heard a little about it." Zhang Yan didn't know about it, but he wasn't in a hurry to speak and waited for the other to continue. Lu Tao's eyes twinkled as he said, "The dragon lake that our Yutsong sect resides in is one of the 10 great spirit caves of the Donghua continent. It's full of vitality and is a 1 in a million cultivation paradise. However, only the sect master can cultivate in the eye of the cave. However, there are 10 other great spirit caves in this world, and the spirit chi there is no less than the spirit caves. The 6 sects of the demon sect occupy 6 of them, and the other 4 are unknown." Pausing, he looked at Zhang Yan and Xie Zongyuan and said, This sea eye is very likely one of the branches of the 4 spirit caves. The spirit chi there is comparable to the high-class paradise that you spiritual masters cultivate in. If we can cultivate there for 2 months, it will be equivalent to cultivating in the outside world for several years. If we can cultivate to the mystic light realm, when we come out, we will be able to show off our skills in the battle of the 3 lakes. Zhang Yan's eyes flashed and he asked, "This spirit cave is actually in our Yutsong sect?" Lu Tao nodded and said, "At the extreme west of the Dragon Lake is the place where the sea eye is located. There is a guardian palace there, and a female deity with high cultivation is cultivating there." Xie Zongyuan frowned and said, "I heard that there are demons wandering in the spirit cave. They are ever-changing, good at bewitching people, and they like to eat the flesh of living people. I wonder if the rumor is true." Lu Tao nodded and said, "That's right. The sect has always sent reliable disciples to eliminate the demons in there. Firstly, it is for them to gain experience, and secondly, it can increase their cultivation. Zhuang Bufan also went there 16 years ago, and he only returned recently. His cultivation is incomparable to 16 years ago, and he has also mastered the great overarching heavenly sleeve. It is all thanks to this demon cave." Xie Zongyuan pondered and said, "If we want to conquer the 3 lakes in one fell swoop, we will need to gather disciples, medicinal pills, and magical treasures. We also have to guard against sneak attacks from other sections. This preparation will take at least 2 to 3 months, but we can make it in time." Lu Tao looked at him and reminded, "But this place is dangerous, and most of the disciples who went there to cultivate won't be able to return. 16 years ago, we sent a total of 7 disciples, and only Zhuang Bufan returned. There is no news of the other 2. If we go there, we can't go too deep. Fortune comes from danger, let's do it." Xie Zongyuan threw the wine cup in his hand to the ground and stood up. He looked at Zhang Yan and said, "Brother Zhang, are you willing to go with me?" Chapter 78. As soon as Xie Zongyuan asked this question, Lu Tao's gaze also followed along. Zhang Yan smiled lightheartedly and said, "People like us who cultivate to attain immortality have always been a path that goes against the heavens, and difficulties and dangers are all tempering. Since there's a door of convenience before us, how can we not go?" Xie Zongyuan was overjoyed and said, "Good. Senior brother Zhang is straightforward, then it's a deal." Lu Tao said, "However, entering the Eye of the Devil's Cave has some rules, and we can't be too hasty. We still need to make preparations. For example, the female immortal of the Guardian Palace won't let you go for no reason. Everyone needs to pay 500 spirit shells." Xie Zongyuan waved his hand and said, "It's just a small number, don't worry about it. Leave it to me." The Xie family was ranked second among the 12 main families, and Xie Zongyuan was a direct disciple. Thousands of spirit shells were naturally not a problem for him, and he could take in Zhang Yan and Lu Tao. No matter how one looked at it, it was a good deal. Lu Tao stood up and cupped his hands at Zhang Yan and Xie Zongyuan. He said, "I won't hide it from you too. I know a Taoist friend who has long passed the 3rd level of clear qi. Due to his limited talent, he spent 3 years to condense the seed of mysterious light, but he couldn't break through. This time, he also has the intention to go." Xie Zongyuan was startled, then said without a care, "Since he's a friend of senior brother Lu, he's naturally someone worth befriending. Let's go together. Entering the Devil's Cave is also dangerous, and one more person means one more force." Lu Tao smiled and said, "Of course I won't ask senior brother Xie to spend money for nothing. This person also comes from the Cold Book. Although his family has long declined, they have a magic treasure passed down from their ancestors, called the Agarwood boat. It can go thousands of feet deep into the pond, and the Eye of the Devil's Cave is also under the pond. If we hold our breath and go, it will inevitably consume our vital energy. With this boat, we can go there." Xie Zongyuan said happily, "Good, senior brother Lu is very thoughtful. When I return to the clan, I will also ask my clansmen to see if I can get some information about the Devil's Cave." He patted the table again and pulled Lu Tao to sit down and drink with him. After discussing this matter, the 3 of them let loose and enjoyed the fine wine and delicacies to their heart's content. When they were in high spirits, Zhang Yan saw that the moon was bright in the sky and the tides were surging on the great marsh. He waved his hand and a beautiful Yuji swam over from the water. He lowered his head and whispered a few words to her. Beauty Yuji nodded cheerfully, dived into the water, and disappeared. Xie Zongyun asked curiously, "What is senior brother Zhang doing?" Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Senior brothers, you will know soon." Not long after, the surrounding waters suddenly lit up with a brilliant brilliance. Specks of light floated up and down in the water as they flickered. Xie Zongyuan and Long Tao glanced over, and they felt as if they were floating on a boat in the Milky Way. When they looked carefully, it turned out that over 100 UG beauties had floated up to the surface of the water together, and each of them held a shining pearl in their hands that reflected the bright moon in the sky. Xie Zongyuan's eyes lit up. He hit the wine cup with his chopsticks and praised, "Wonderful, wonderful, this scene deserves a jug." After saying that, he rolled up his sleeves, raised his head, and poured the jug of wine into his mouth. Lu Tao sighed and said, "This must be the scenery of the water country, the UG holding the pearl. I didn't expect to see it in the sect today. If we let Zhuang Bufan do as he pleases, I'm afraid we won't be able to see such a wonderful scene." Xie Zongyun glared at him with dissatisfaction and said, "There is a beautiful scenery in front of us. Why did senior brother Lu mention him? Drinking as punishment." Lu Tao smiled and drank the wine in one gulp. The three of them swam until late into the night. Both the host and the guest were happy. After deciding on a date for their next meeting, Zhang Yan sent Long Tao away but asked Xie Zongyuan to stay behind. He cupped his hands and said, "Senior brother Xie, I have a favor to ask of you." Xie Zongyuan said with emotion, "Junior brother, you don't have to be so polite, please speak." Zhang Yan took out a book and placed it on the table. This book is called The Red Cloud Red Flame Scroll. Wang Pan lost to me in a duel that day and I plan to return it to the Wang clan. I am willing to swear that I won't spread it, so I hope senior brother Xie can be a middleman. Xie Zongyuan glanced at the book and stopped smiling. He nodded slightly and said, "What do you want, junior brother?" His mind was clear. Zhang Yan naturally wouldn't return the book to the Wang clan for no reason. If he wanted to return it, he would have returned it long ago. Therefore, he must have a plan. Zhang Yan said, "I want a good fire attribute cloud sand." Xie Zongyun chuckled and said, "It's just a cloud sand. Senior brother, you don't have to worry. It won't be difficult for me to handle this matter. I'll have a reply in 2 or 3 days." He didn't ask Zhang Yan what he wanted the fire attribute cloud sand for. In his opinion, these were all minor details. Moreover, everyone had their own secrets, so he definitely wouldn't ask what he shouldn't ask. After a few more words, Xie Zongyuan bid farewell and left. Zhang Yan didn't return to his cave abode either. He poured himself a cup of wine and drank by himself, but he was thinking about Lu Tao. Lu Tao coming here today shouldn't have been a spur-of-the-moment idea. He must have planned this a long time ago. However, the people he wanted to rope in were all useful for entering the Devil's Cave. His friend had a treasure boat, Xie Zongyuan had wealth and connections, and his own cultivation level wasn't high. In the eyes of others, he didn't have much wealth, so why did he seem to care so much about whether he could go or not? However, he could also see that although this person was scheming, he didn't have any evil intentions. It was just that he couldn't let his guard down. After all, this trip to the Devil's Cave was very risky, and it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he had a slim chance of survival. He also needed to make sufficient preparations so that he wouldn't be caught off guard. He thought to himself, "Senior brother Zhou has been in the sect for more than 200 years, so he must know some things about the Devil's Cave. Why don't I go and ask him tomorrow?" After making up his mind, he got up and returned to his cave abode to meditate. The next day, when the sky was just beginning to turn white, he took a bath and changed his clothes. Then he boarded a flying boat and went to Danding Courtyard to see Zhou Chongju. He told him about his plan to go to the Devil's Cave. "What? You want to go to the Sea's Eye Devil's Cave to cultivate?" After hearing this news, Zhou Chongju frowned, as if he had something difficult to do. He stood up and paced back and forth in the pavilion. Then he stood still and turned his head to say, "Junior brother, let me ask you. That day, the cloud sand that Yan Gongzhen bestowed upon you belonged to what? Yan Gongzhen was Zhenren Yan's real name. Zhang Yan had never heard of it, but he knew who he was talking about. He immediately answered, "It's a gold cloud sand." Zhou Changju sneered and said, "I knew he was a very narrow-minded person. You've offended his disciple, so how could he be so kind?" He looked at Zhang Yan again and said, "Junior brother, don't blame me for knowing his intentions but not telling you. I have other plans, so I'm not afraid of him playing tricks on you. But if you go to the Sea's Eye Devil's Cave now, it'll be a little troublesome." Zhang Yan said sincerely, "Senior brother naturally won't harm me. What kind of trouble is it?" Zhou Changju nodded and said, "Now I won't hide it from you." When the senior left, he passed on a 5-direction 5-element Taishan true light. This is not a cultivation technique, but a technique left behind by the Taishan sect 10,000 years ago. It is said to be very powerful, and he wanted me to give it to the person with great luck. Thus, in the past 200 years, I haven't looked through it. Pausing, he sighed again. "It wasn't until you entered the Dan Ding Pavilion that I took it out and flipped through it. I found that there was a key step. You need to find the 5-element cloud sand before the mystic light realm and form a Xian seed. I originally wanted you to cultivate in peace and then slowly find it and give it to you. That day, when Yan Gongzhen gave you the cloud sand, I was happy to see it happen." Hearing this, Zhang Yan couldn't help but understand. His talent was obviously not high, and he had never revealed that he was cultivating the Tai Golden Book. He didn't know why Zhou Changju always had so much confidence in him. Now, it seemed that not only did he believe in the judgment of the senior, but he also had this technique, so he was very confident. "It's just that man proposes, God disposes. I didn't think that you were planning to go cultivate in the demonic cave. Right now, I only have 3 cloud sand on me." Zhou Changju raised his hand and took out 3 brocade boxes from his sleeve. He placed them on the table and opened them. He took out 3 cloud sand each. He pointed at one of them. It was a dark green cloud sand and said, "This is the wood cloud sand. I obtained it by chance in the herb garden 50 years ago. Its quality is very good." He then pointed at the other one and said, "This is the metal cloud sand. I obtained it recently, but compared to the one Yan Gongzhen gave you, it's probably much worse. Don't mention it." Then he reached out and picked up the last one. He said, "This is the earth cloud sand. I bought it recently, but the quality is much worse. It's a bit ugly." The amount of earth cloud sand in this world was the highest. Even in the mortal world, there was a lot of it. Unfortunately, the quality of earth cloud sand was the hardest to obtain. Zhou Changju, as the monastery head of the Dan Ding Pavilion, couldn't find it in such a short period of time. Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Everything is difficult in this world. Having it is better than not having it. Senior apprentice brother, you don't need to be so demanding." Zhou Changju nodded slightly and then sighed. "But I'm still missing 2. One is the water cloud sand and the other is the fire cloud sand." Zhang Yan thought for a moment and said, "I have a way to find the fire cloud sand. But I don't know where to find the fire cloud sand." Hearing this, Zhou Changju suddenly became spirited. He asked, "Oh, you can find the fire cloud sand? How confident are you?" Zhang Yan thought for a moment and said, 80 to 90%. Good. Zhou Changju said the word, "good," 3 times. His eyes flashed. "Do you still remember the clear nether lake I told you about last time?" "Of course I remember. But that time, I had already reached Clear Nether Mountain. Because I encountered a demon, I was forcefully brought back by Zhuang Bufan." Zhou Changju said in a low voice, "Then you need to go again. 1,000 feet below the Clear Nether Lake, there is that cloud sand." Chapter 79. East Hua Continent, Zhaoyu Mountain. This rugged and strange mountain rose into the clouds, looking like a pillar that held up the sky. In East Hua Continent, it was known as Little Buzhou. The Zhaoyu Heavenly Lake was located at the top of this mountain. At night, the silver stars were all reflected in it, creating a spectacular scene. Because the lake was so deep, there were rumors that it led to the 9 underworlds, so some people described it as connecting the Milky Way at the top and the netherworld at the bottom. This time, Zhang Yan passed through Little Wave Mountain without any wind or waves and arrived here smoothly. This was the territory of the three great demons, Guizongya. Standing on a high place, one could see the surrounding scenery. This demon lord liked peace, so there were rarely any cultivators here. For safety's sake, Zhang Yan summoned Luo Xiao to keep him by his side as they continued to climb up the mountain. After flying for a day and a night, around the middle of the second day, the two finally reached the mountain peak. At this time, a blue lake with a circumference of thousands of miles appeared in front of them. The surface of the lake was tranquil without any ripples, clear as if it had been washed, and it was like a flat mirror. It was difficult for birds to pass through here, and clear air surrounded the lake. Moreover, the clouds in the surroundings surged like the sea, causing it to seem vast, and extraordinary. Zhang Yan just stood there and looked around, and he found that this place was full of spirit qi, not inferior to his spirit page island at all. The sea of clouds surged around him, and he had the illusion that he could touch the sky if he reached out and touched it, making him want to open his chest and embrace this part of the world. Excited, he couldn't help but chant with his hands behind his back. The sky makes the clouds, the air swallows the celestial house, the wind blows, the gate of heaven opens. Hearing this, Luo Xiao covered her mouth and chuckled. Master is so bold. You must have a plan to find the cloud sand. However, Zhang Yan shook his head. If this Zhaoyu heavenly lake was only 100 miles in circumference, then it would be easy, but this place was boundless. Zhou Chongju only said that the water attribute cloud sand was 100 feet under the water, and when he asked for details, he didn't say anything. Who knew where it was? In that case, he could only rely on himself to slowly search for it. Thinking about it, this cheap senior brother would not casually fool him. However, since this was Gui Zongyao's territory, they didn't dare to casually fly over, lest they startled this great demon. After discussing with Luo Xiao for a while, the two of them decided to split up and search. Since they had sworn a blood oath, they didn't have to worry about not being able to find each other. Once in the water, Luo Xiao revealed his true form. He transformed into a giant python that was 30 feet long and moved along the shore towards the west. As soon as Zhang Yan entered the water, he used the small wave-splitting technique from the Billowing Cloud's secret manual. His speed in the water wasn't slow. He slowly dived down to a depth of 1,000 feet. There were all kinds of huge, strange fish swimming back and forth. The lake water was cold to the bone, but with his cultivation, he could still withstand it. He searched all the way to the east. After about 3 to 5 days, he suddenly had a feeling. For some reason, he felt that the thing he was looking for was nearby. After a careful search, he found a bright blue patch on a mountain wall close to the shore. When he looked again, his eyes couldn't help but show joy. It turned out that this place was actually a blue broad wave sand vein. It was like a ribbon winding through the crevices of the mountain rocks. There was a lot of cloud sand in it, but it was as translucent and glossy as crystal. It was clearly of high quality. He looked back and forth a few times, and finally his gaze fell on one of the cloud sand. This cloud sand wasn't large, but it was full of spirituality. It was bright and full, almost giving him the illusion that it was alive. Compared to it, the others of its kind seemed to be common things of the lower realm. He didn't expect to find it so easily. Zhang Yan was happy. He looked left and right, and after confirming that there was no danger, he walked forward and carefully picked up the cloud sand. He wasn't in a hurry to put it away. Instead, he paused to see if there was any movement in the surroundings. After a long time, he didn't find anything strange. Only then did he let out a light sigh of relief and put it into his sleeve. When he was about to leave, suddenly, countless tides surged from all around him, wrapping around him and pulling him into the depths of the heavenly lake. Zhang Yan was shocked. He was about to move, but he felt that this power couldn't be resisted at all. Then, his vision darkened, and he suddenly felt dizzy. After an unknown amount of time, when he opened his eyes again, he found himself in a cave of white jade. Outside the void window, there was a misty haze, and the surroundings were inlaid with pearls, precious shells, and all kinds of colored stones. It looked colorful and beautiful. He sat on a jade chair, and opposite him was a jade bed. On the bed sat Daoren in a feathered robe and a star crown. This person had white hair and a youthful face. His face was like the full moon, and he held a horsetail whisk. Seeing that Zhang Yan had woken up, he looked at him warmly and asked, "Looking at your attire, are you a disciple of the Yu Tsang sect?" Zhang Yan tidied his robe, stood up and bowed. "Yes, I am. How should I address senior?" The old Taoist chuckled and said, "I am Gui Zongyao." Gui Zongyao? One of the 3 pools of monster monarchs. Master of the Zhaoyu Heavenly Lake? A great monster that cultivated for thousands of years? He didn't think that this person didn't have a trace of monster qi, and instead, looked like a cultivator that achieved the Tao. Zhang Yan was shocked, but his expression didn't show any panic. He cupped his hands and said, "Yunwan is House Master Gui. Junior is Zhang Yan of the Yu Tsang sect. It is an honor to meet senior." Gui Zongyao stared at Zhang Yan. "Let me ask you, was it you who took the water cloud sand outside my sect?" Zhang Yan did not hesitate and answered truthfully, "That's right, it was this junior who took it." In front of a great monster like this, there was no point in hiding his cultivation, so he might as well be honest. But after hearing this, Gui Zongyao wasn't angry. Instead, he was overjoyed. "You found your fortune, you found your fortune." Zhang Yan was surprised, but then his heart skipped a beat as if he had a clue. Gui Zongyao smiled, "Fellow Taoist, don't be confused. The water cloud sand you took was left behind 150 years ago by a master who passed by. He once said that if someone came to take it after 150 years, that person would be my benefactor. I have been waiting for you in my dwelling for many years, and now you are finally here." Zhang Yan's eyes flickered, wondering if this was the reason why Zhou Changju asked him to come to the Zhaoyu Heavenly Lake. It must be, or else Zhou Changju wouldn't let him come to this monster lord's territory to take something. This meant that the master Gui Zongyao mentioned was Daoren, the one who guided him to the Qinsong school. While he was thinking, Gui Zongyao stared at him for a long time, then sighed and shook his head. "I didn't expect you to be the one who killed me." Zhang Yan was shocked, but seeing Gui Zongyao's expression, he didn't think he was joking, so he said cautiously, "Junior's cultivation level is low. Even if I cultivate for another 100 years, I won't be your opponent." Gui Zongyao laughed. Don't be afraid, I have my reasons for saying this. Ever since I gained consciousness, I have cultivated for more than 2,000 years, and lived for a total of 3,649 years. But because of my natural limitations, my cultivation level hasn't improved in the past few hundred years. That day, when that master passed by, I asked him how long I have left to live, and he told me that the day my lifespan ends will be 3,650 years old. At that time, my 1,000 years of hard work will turn into a pile of bones. When he finished, he sighed and sighed. When Zhang Yan heard this, he also felt a little sad. He was now a Ming Qi cultivator, and his lifespan was about 300 years. Without any miraculous encounters, his lifespan wouldn't increase until he reached the Golden Dan realm. Even if he reached the Yuanying realm, he would only have a lifespan of 1,000 years. It sounded long, but to cultivators who often went into isolation for hundreds of years, it was actually very short. Perhaps, only when he reached the immortal realm and became the legendary De Luo Jin Xian, would he be able to live for eternity. Gui Zongyao continued, "I asked that master if there was a way to prolong my lifespan. He said that my foundation was not strong enough and that there was no hope for me in this life unless I could find a person with great luck to help me resolve my problems when my lifespan was about to end, so that I could reincarnate and cultivate again. There was still a chance for me to achieve the Tao. I asked him where to find such a person, and he threw this piece of cloud sand to me. He said that when this piece of cloud sand is picked up by someone, that person will arrive." Zhang Yan nodded slowly. Actually, after he embarked on this path, he understood that reincarnation wasn't an easy path. If one didn't have a special Tao artifact or a supreme divine ability to protect them, they would lose all their memories of their previous lives after reincarnation. However, this was still better than a cultivator reaching the end of their lifespan and dying. Gui Zongyao smiled at Zhang Yan and said, "Friend, there is still half a year before my death. It is not the last moment yet, Why don't you stay here and help me when the time comes? Zhang Yan thought about it seriously, then slowly shook his head. Gui Zongyao was not annoyed by his rejection. Instead, he tried to persuade him, I have been cultivating for thousands of years and have many treasures. What do you think about my residence? After I die, I'll give it to you. I can also give you the body that I shed after I die. I even know a few immortal abodes that no one knows about, and I can guide you there. What do you think? Again, Zhang Yan shook his head. Gui Zongyao was surprised. Could it be that you think that I am a demon and because of my sectarian bias, you are not willing to help me, Daoren? Zhang Yan thought for a while and decided to tell the truth. Senior, you have misunderstood me. It is not that I am not willing to help you, but in a few months, the Yutsong sect will gather our disciples to wipe out the 3 pools of demonic cultivators. Before that, I have to go to the Eye of the Sea to increase my cultivation level, so I cannot stay here. He was not afraid that Gui Zongyao would find out about this. The 3 pools and the Yutsong sect had been fighting for so many years, they naturally had ways to know about the movements of the Yutsong sect. In the past, the Yutsong sect was wary of the Shui kingdom, so they did not go all out. But now that they have made up their minds, wiping out the 3 pools in half a year was not a joke. As expected, after hearing this news, Gui Zongyao's expression was the same as usual. He stroked his beard and pondered for a while, then said, I have heard of the Eye of the Sea, but I have never been there. However, I heard that this place is extremely dangerous. If you are not careful, you will be buried here. Since you want to go, I will give you something to help you. With a flick of his horsetail whisk, a gray talisman flew into Zhang Yan's arms. This is the pure Qi shield. After I went through the trial, I made it with the broken shells on my body. It can block out disasters and divine arts. Today, I will give it to you. He smiled and said, I know that the Yutsong sect's merit courtyard has a bounty on my head. When the 3 pools are besieged, come back here and kill me. I will give it to you. Chapter 80. After receiving Xie Zongyuan's invitation, everyone boarded his dragon-tooth flying ship. This flying ship was worthy of being used by Xian Light Realm cultivators. Its speed was not inferior to flying swords. In less than a day, a palace with green tiles and vermilion pillars appeared in the distance. From afar, there was an auspicious aura rising from the roof of the palace and connected with the auspicious clouds in the sky. A ray of light broke through the clouds and sprinkled down, illuminating the 3 jade steps in front of the palace like frozen water clouds, sparkling and translucent. The green smoke in front of the copper incense burner was also illusory and blurred. Xie Zongyuan exclaimed, the spiritual aura is soaring to the sky. This Taoist Peng's cultivation is very high. When he uses his Xian technique, he can actually sense the heavens and the clouds accompany him. I'm afraid that our Qinsong school will soon change its name to the 10 Great Taoist Masters. Zhao Zhen snorted and interrupted, How can it be so simple? It seems like a step, but the difference is like heaven and earth. My granduncle once said that if Taoist Peng can cross this barrier within 100 years, then it's fine. If he can't, then he probably won't have any hope in this life. Although Xie Zongyuan didn't agree, he didn't dare to say more before they were about to enter the Guardian Palace. He didn't want Taoist Peng to hear him and cause more trouble. Zhao Zhen thought his words were sharp and hit the nail on the head, so he couldn't help but feel proud. Zhang Yan found it funny. Every time someone brought up a topic, Zhao Zhen would always come up to oppose them. The more he opposed, the more his fighting spirit rose. His words were also somewhat twisted, which was really annoying. If it wasn't for the fact that they needed to rely on this person to lead the way, they would have been kicked out long ago. Seeing the flying ship arrive, a beautiful Taoist nun with a straight face came up to greet them. She cupped her hands and said, Senior brothers, are you also here to cultivate in the demon cave? Lu Tao and Zhang Yan looked at each other. Lu Tao asked curiously, Other than us, could it be that someone else has come here? The Taoist nun smiled and said, Senior brother is right. 5 days ago, Taoist Master Yan's disciple, Senior brother Fang Zhen, came here and said that he wanted to take you into the demon cave to cultivate. 3 days ago, several senior brothers from the Yunlang Han clan also came here. Including you, there are more than 20 people. The Han family of Yunlang? Even Xie Zongyuan was slightly moved. The Han clan of Yunlang was one of the 5 great families, and it was an aristocratic family among the aristocratic families of Qinsong School. It seemed that the disciples of such a family rarely came into contact with the disciples of their own sections. He had not expected that they would come to the Devil's Cave to cultivate this time. It seemed that they wanted to attack the 3 pools to increase their cultivation as soon as possible. The Taoist nun continued, "The Sea's Eye Gate opens on the first day of the month and opens on the 15th. I'm afraid you'll have to wait for a few more days. How should I address you? I can go in and clean the house and prepare the vegetarian meal." Xie Zongyuan was just about to answer when Zhao Zhen suddenly sneered, "There's no need to say the name, I'm afraid I'll end up eating my tongue tonight." The Taoist nun was startled when she heard this. Her face blushed and her eyes were filled with embarrassment. She didn't say a word as she turned around and walked inside. Xie Zongyuan shook his head and said, "I didn't expect Fang Zhen and the others to also come." Zhang Yan's eyes flickered and he said, "It's not strange. Fang Zhen is also at the 3rd layer of clear qi. They must know that the sect is about to attack the 3 pools, so they also came here to cultivate. Moreover, everyone knows that spiritual masters Zhu and Yen are very close friends. Zhuang Bufan is also spiritual master Zhu's disciple. He has been suppressing the Devil's Cave for 16 years and not a single demon has escaped, so he should be very familiar with the situation inside." Suppressing? Zhao Zhen's face was full of disdain when he heard this. He curled his lips and said, "They're just using this as an excuse to openly cultivate their supernatural power. If it wasn't for the Guardian Palace's great formation, the demon inside would have escaped long ago. Why would they need him to suppress it? It doesn't matter if he's missing or not." Xie Zongyuan coughed and glanced at Long Tao. The latter immediately understood and said, "This is my first time coming to the Guardian Palace. I wonder what kind of scenery there is. Why don't Brother Zhao take me around for a tour?" He didn't wait for Zhao Zhen's reply and dragged him away. Cheng Yin didn't make a sound along the way. After hesitating for a moment, he also followed Long Tao. Xie Zongyuan called Zhang Yan to a secluded corner and said, "We're not familiar with the path under the eye of the sea. The only one we can count on is Zhao Zhen. However, this person likes to talk big and is impetuous. I really don't know if he can shoulder this responsibility." Seeing that Xie Zongyuan was also angry, Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Don't doubt the people you use, don't use the people you doubt. Moreover, this person's words are not without purpose. He's just sharp-tongued. Senior brother can just treat it as a joke." Xie Zongyuan nodded and said, "What I'm worried about now is that Fang Zhen and the others know that we're going to the Devil's Cave. They might try to sabotage us." Zhang Yan understood the meaning behind his words and thought for a moment before saying in a low voice, "We have to be on our guard." Right at this moment, the Taoist nun who had left earlier turned back. However, she was expressionless at this moment. "Senior brothers, I've already checked and the guest rooms are all full. The Guardian Palace is also filled with female cultivators, so it's not convenient for us to receive guests. All of you are cultivators who eat and drink qi, so I presume you won't mind sleeping outside for a night, right?" Xie Zongyuan frowned. He didn't really care about where he stayed. However, Fang Zhen and the others were clearly staying in the hall while they stayed outside. If they met another day, wouldn't they be ridiculed by others and tarnish the Xie clan's reputation? Zhang Yan felt that this was also a good idea. It would prevent them from meeting Fang Zhen and the others. Who knew what kind of trouble might occur? At this moment he heard someone call out in pleasant surprise from behind, "Senior brother Zhang." Zhang Yan couldn't help turning around and saw Qin Nan standing not far away. Her pretty face was flushed and she wore a Taoist robe similar to the Taoist nuns. He couldn't help but ask in surprise, "Junior sister Qin? Are you cultivating here?" Qin Nan's face was full of joy as she replied, "Yes." She thought for a moment, then turned to the Taoist nun and said, "These senior brothers are guests from afar. Since the guest rooms are all full, prepare a side hall for them to rest in." The Taoist nun lowered her head and respectfully replied, Yes, martial ant. Xie Zongyun chuckled and said, Junior brother, since you've met an old friend, you must have a lot to talk about. I'll go take a walk elsewhere. With a wave of his sleeve, he walked away in a carefree manner. Zhang Yan smiled and said, How do I address junior sister and immortal Peng? Qin Nan was a little embarrassed and said, I was originally senior brother Chen's disciple in name. Later, when the patriarch saw me, he took me in as his last disciple. Zhang Yan carefully looked at Qin Nan and sighed, Junior sister is really lucky. The two of them had only been separated for about half a month, but he didn't expect Qin Nan to already be at the peak of the first tier of the clear Qi realm. Moreover, it seemed that she would soon break through to the second tier. This speed of cultivation was really incredible. Qin Nan stared at Zhang Yan with her eyes wide open and said, Senior brother, you also came to the Devil's Cave to cultivate? Zhang Yan replied, Yes, junior sister, have you been there before? Qin Nan nodded vigorously, Yes, I've been cultivating there every day for the past few days. Zhang Yan suddenly understood. No wonder Qin Nan's cultivation advanced by leaps and bounds. So this was the reason. Thinking of this, he was moved and asked, Since junior sister has been here before, do you know the path under the eye of the sea? Qin Nan thought for a moment, and after a moment her beautiful eyes lit up and she said, Senior brother, please wait a moment. She turned and left. After about the time it took for a stick of incense to burn, she rushed back and handed over a 1-foot square silk map with both hands. He saw that it was filled with densely packed and indistinguishable red lines. This is the map I saw in Master Study. I've made a copy, but I don't know if it's useful. Senior brother, you might as well take it. Chapter 81. Thank you, junior sister. Zhang Yan took the map, glanced at it briefly, and then folded it and put it in his sleeve. With this map, he would not be led by the nose by Zhao Zhen. But that was all. The places that immortal Peng could go might not be the places that he could go. Therefore, the most important function of the map was to have a reference so that he would not get lost. Qin Nan blushed and said, Senior brother is too polite. I haven't thanked senior brother for helping me last time. At this point, she exclaimed in a low voice, Aya, I still have to return that flying boat to senior brother. She reached out to take the flying boat from her waist pouch. But Zhang Yan raised his hand to stop her and said with a smile, Leave the flying boat with me. I don't need it now. It will be much more convenient for you to visit my Spirit Page Island in the future. Qin Nan thought for a moment and nodded. They talked for a long time. When it was almost 7 o'clock and the sky was getting dark, Qin Nan personally led the way and brought Zhang Yan to the East Side Hall. The layout of Shoming Palace was simple. The main hall was arranged according to the north-south vertical axis, and the side halls were located on both sides. The terrain was low in the south and high in the north. The tallest building in the whole hall was the Flying Crane Building, which was the center of the island's restriction formation. The Eye of the Sea was under the Flying Crane Building. It was this building that suppressed the Devil's Cave and prevented the devil from coming to the outside world. Qin Nan walked Zhang Yan to the door of the hall and then left. She didn't need to remind the deacon priestess in the hall to offend the guest of the patriarch's favorite disciple. She hurried to greet him. When Zhang Yan was about to step into the hall, he noticed a person passing by in a hurry. He stopped and shouted, Senior brother Feng, how are you? It was Feng Ming. Since he lost the sword competition on Yingluo Island and received Elder Sun's warning, he had been avoiding Zhang Yan. Even in front of the little wave mountain, he tried his best to avoid him. He didn't expect to meet Zhang Yan this time. After a moment of surprise, he cupped his hands in front of his chest and said, Senior brother Zhang. Zhang Yan's seniority in the sect was 1 generation higher than his, but in terms of seniority, Zhang Yan was after him, so it was appropriate for them to call each other brother outside. Zhang Yan glanced left and right and saw that Feng Ming was walking in the direction of the West Hall. Moreover, his footsteps were hurried. If he wasn't going to see Feng Zhen, then he had something important to attend to. Zhang Yan's eyes narrowed as a plan formed in his mind. He stepped forward and said, This devil's lair is extremely dangerous. Senior brother Feng is an elite of the sect, so you must be careful. Feng Ming said perfunctorily, "Yes, yes. With senior marshal brother Feng here, there's no problem." Zhang Yan dragged Feng Ming to talk about all sorts of things. Every time the latter wanted to say goodbye, he would be interrupted. He wanted to fling his sleeves and leave, but Zhang Yan was smiling and talking, so he couldn't bring himself to do so. At this moment, Zhang Yan caught a glimpse of a figure from the corner of his eye. He remained calm and collected, raising his voice slightly. "Today I had a good talk with senior brother. Let's talk again some other day." Feng Ming was baffled, wondering how he could have such a good relationship with senior marshal brother. However, he could only politely say, Of course. Zhang Yan smiled faintly and cupped his hands together in farewell. Feng Ming shook his head and also turned to leave. However, he hadn't taken more than a few steps when a cold voice came from behind him. "Junior marshal brother Feng, you and senior marshal brother Zhang are quite close." Feng Ming quivered and turned around to see Feng Zhen standing there. He couldn't help being shocked and hurriedly said, "It was just a chance encounter on the road. Senior marshal brother, please don't misunderstand." "Oh, is that so?" Feng Zhen smiled faintly as he stepped forward and lightly patted Feng Ming's shoulder, saying, "Junior marshal brother Feng is worrying too much. Zhang Yan and the others don't have long to live, so why should we care about a group of people who are about to die?" Feng Ming was startled, asking, "What does senior marshal brother mean?" Feng Zhen sneered, "Do you really think the Devil's Lair is so easy to enter? Xie Zongyuan and the others only know some fragmented news, and some of it was even deliberately spread by my people." Feng Ming suddenly raised his head and looked at Feng Zhen in shock. Feng Zhen snickered and said, "How can it be easy to deal with demons? Putting aside the Yin demons and walking demons, there are also many true demons. If we encounter them, killing us light aura cultivators is as easy as flipping our hands. Back when senior marshal brother Zhuang was cultivating in the Devil's Lair, there were a few places with restrictions that we could cultivate in peace. However, Xie Zongyuan and the others didn't know about this. Junior marshal brother Feng, as long as you follow me well and successfully enter the mystic light realm, then show off your skills in the battle of the 3 pools and obtain a few more merit points, there will definitely be a place for you when I open a sect in the future." Feng Ming sucked in a cold breath and didn't dare to say anything else. He could only agree. Feng Zhen nodded in satisfaction and then said in a low voice, "This time, I brought the 5 fire divine weapon ring. Even if Zhang Yan, Xie Zongyuan, and the others are really lucky and aren't targeted by the demons, I still need to resolve the grudges between us." Before this trip, Taoist Master Yen had called him over and carefully warned him, saying that if there was a chance, he could get rid of Zhang Yan, who was a hindrance, so that he wouldn't be pushed out by the Meng clan and Sun clan in the future. However, he reminded him that he had to do it secretly. For this reason, he even gave him the 5 fire divine weapon ring that he had already taken away. Feng Ming's heart shook. Fighting against one's own brother? This senior marshal brother Feng was really bold. Just as he was about to persuade him, he swallowed the words that were about to come out of his mouth when he met the other's eyes that were filled with hatred. After hesitating for a moment, his lips moved and he said, "I'm afraid this is not a good idea. Han Ji, a disciple of the Han clan, is also on this trip. I'm afraid there will be many variables. If it is leaked," Feng Zhen waved his hand and didn't seem to care. "You don't need to worry about this person, and you don't need to be scared by the name of the Han clan. In my opinion, this person will most likely die here. If he is a hindrance, then kill him as well." Feng Ming said in surprise, "Senior marshal brother, he is a member of the Han clan. How could the disciples of the 5 families be killed so easily? Even if Feng Zhen was a disciple of Zhenren Yen, was he really not afraid of the Han clan looking for trouble with him?" Feng Zhen snorted and revealed a disdainful expression. Han Ji was only born of a concubine and suffered a serious injury in his mother's womb. Originally, his father didn't want him to be born, but his mother insisted, so he was born. This person has been disliked in the Han clan since he was a child. He has cultivated for 38 years and barely reached the 3rd tier of the Bright Chi realm, and he relied on the cultivation method that his mother stole. Later, his mother was beaten to death because of the leak. Considering that he is a member of the Han clan, he only lived in seclusion for 3 years. At this point he sneered again. For the Han clan, this person can be regarded as a disgrace of the clan. This time, they let him come here because they want him to die. The more Feng Ming listened, the more surprised he became. He thought to himself, how does senior martial brother Feng know these secrets of the large clans? His heart was suddenly shaken, and a sense of unfathomable mystery welled up in his heart. Fear also appeared in his eyes. Seeing Feng Ming's expression, Feng Jin knew that Feng Ming had been intimidated by him. He couldn't help but feel proud and said, now, in my opinion, Zhang Yan, Xiezong Yuan, and the others are just bones in a grave. In the future, in this generation of Qinsong school, it will be our world sooner or later. Chapter 82. Xiezong Yuan rolled up his sleeves and took out a cloud sand, pushing it in front of Zhang Yan. Senior brother Zhang, I didn't disappoint you. Zhang Yan cupped his hands. Thank you, senior brother Xie. He took the cloud sand and glanced at it before putting it away in his sleeves. His expression was incomparably natural. On the surface, it seemed as if this item was of no importance to him. He then took out 5 porcelain bottles and placed them on the table. These are calming pills, personally refined by my master. I'll pass them to you, senior brother Xie. Xiezong Yuan's eyes lit up. With these bottles of pills, we won't have to worry about Yin demons. Zhang Yan said, Yin demons are easy to deal with, but vile people are hard to guard against. I'm sure this trip won't be peaceful. What does senior brother Xie think? Xiezong Yuan naturally understood the meaning behind his words and laughed. Xiezong Yuan, am not a soft-hearted person. Junior brother, don't worry. Both of them understood that Feng Zhen was a person who would seek revenge for the smallest grievance. Previously, he was punished by the sect because of them, so he would definitely bear a grudge. Now that he had entered the demon's cave, he had no scruples and would most likely not stay put. After discussing for a while, Zhang Yan bid farewell to Xiezong Yuan and returned to his room. There were 6 more days until the 1st of the next month, when the Eye of the Sea would open. It wasn't a long time, but it wasn't short either. Zhang Yan thought about it and decided that he wasn't in a hurry to condense the seed of profound light. The serene in heavy water recorded in the Lan Yun's secret book was extremely powerful, but he couldn't find the time to condense it. The spiritual energy here was abundant, unlike the Spirit Page Island, so he might as well make use of the time he had to condense a drop. After making up his mind, he sat on the praying mat and silently circulated the technique. He had already practiced this technique no less than 100 times in the Broken Jade, so he was familiar with it. His aura circulated freely without any sluggishness. Time passed quickly, and on the 6th day, all the cold qi in his qi orifice had been completely melted away. Looking inside, he saw a drop of water that looked like black jade floating in his chest. This water droplet was only the size of a thumb, but according to what was recorded in the Billowing Cloud secret book, just this droplet had the strength of 1,000 caddies. But he had never tested it before, so he didn't know exactly how strong it was. Right at this moment, Zhang Yan noticed someone loitering outside the door, and he couldn't help but open his eyes and say in a low voice, "Who's there?" The deacon nun's voice came from outside. "Is senior brother Zhang here?" Today is the opening and closing of the Eye of the Sea. The few Shixiang saw that Shixiang was in seclusion a few days ago, so they did not disturb you. They said that after Shixiang comes out, they will meet at the Flying Crane Tower. I know. You can go now. Zhang Yan tidied himself up and left the side hall. It was inconvenient to fly in the Nameless Palace, so he walked up the stone steps and arrived at the Soaring Crane Tower in about 15 minutes. After the deacon nun verified his identity, she let him in. After entering the tower, he found that there was a cave about 10 meters long in the middle of the hall, and the surging seawater kept surging in it, making rumbling sounds. The surroundings were surrounded by a layer of white jade, and it looked like a well fence. This was the Eye of the Sea, which was similar to the Devil's Cave. The Devil's Cave wasn't dead, and the qi inside also surged like it was breathing. On the 1st day of the lunar month, it would suck in, and on the 15th day, it would spit out. So on the first day of the lunar month, as long as one followed the flow of the eye of the sea, they would be able to enter. On the west side of the hall, Feng Zhen, Feng Ming, and 3 other cultivators stood together. When they saw him enter, other than Feng Ming, they all looked at him with unfriendly eyes. On the east side stood a young cultivator with a pale complexion. His expression was calm, and he stood there without speaking or moving. Presumably, he was that clansman of the Han clan. There were 5 cultivators surrounding him, and they seemed to be followers. However, there wasn't even a trace of respect in their expressions. At this moment, a cry came from the corner. Zhang Yan looked over and saw that Lu Tao seemed to be talking to a sobbing female cultivator, while Xie Zongyuan stood at the side and shook his head. Zhao Zhen had his arms crossed and a cold smile on his face. Zhang Yan walked over and asked, "Senior brother Xie, what's the matter?" Seeing Zhang Yan arrive, Xie Zongyuan sighed and pointed at the female cultivator, saying, "That is Madame Chen, a disciple of the Guardian Palace. After her husband entered the Eye of the Sea a month ago, he didn't come out again. So this time, she begged everyone in the hall to take her into the Devil's Cave. For this reason, she begged so hard that she didn't kneel. Although she is a cultivator, she still has true feelings for her husband." Zhang Yan smiled. Although cultivators are cultivators, they still aren't supreme enlightened masters. They still have 7 emotions and 6 desires. Some seek fame, some seek wealth, and some seek power. This Madame Chen must be seeking love. Hearing this, Xie Zongyuan couldn't help but tease, "Then what does senior brother Zhang want?" The corner of Zhang Yan's mouth gradually turned into a smile, and he said, "Nothing else, I just want to live forever." Xie Zongyuan laughed and said, "Of course, to be free and unfettered is what I want." As soon as he finished speaking, a muffled sound of thunder suddenly rang out in the hall, and everyone's eyes unconsciously looked towards the entrance of the cave. The seawater there first gurgled out, then as if the bottom layer had been sucked out, it formed a whirlpool and slowly sank down. Someone exclaimed, "The time has come, the Eye of the Sea has been opened." Feng Zhen and the others reacted the fastest. Seeing that the Eye of the Sea had been opened, they all made hand seals, waiting for a treasure light to flash on their bodies, and all of them leaped in without any hesitation. Almost in the instant they entered, they disappeared without a trace. The Han disciple held up an incense burner and waved it in his hand. A gust of smoke enveloped him and the 5 people behind him. He took a few steps forward and also leaped into the Eye of the Sea, disappearing in an instant. Seeing this, Lu Tao looked at Cheng'en and said, "Senior brother Cheng, we can also set off." Cheng'en hurriedly took out a talisman and waved it. A light flashed, and a boat appeared in front of everyone. This boat was flat and wide, shaped like an old turtle. There were mechanism gates on both sides, and there were empty windows on the upper walls. Perhaps because of the special wood, the body of the boat emitted a strange fragrance, and it smelled refreshing. Zhao Zhen impatiently took the lead and stepped in. Seeing that everyone had left, Madame Chen's crying became louder. Zhang Yan glanced over and saw that Madame Chen had shapely eyebrows and cherry lips, and her figure seemed to be extremely weak. When she cried, she was extremely miserable, and it caused others to be unable to help but feel pity for her. However, he was thinking about another matter. He called out to Xie Zongyuan and said, "Senior brother Xie, since Madame Chen is a disciple of the Guardian Palace, she must be familiar with the path to the Devil's Cave. It will be beneficial to us, why not bring her along?" Xie Zongyuan shook his head and said, "I originally planned to do so, but the Agarwood boat can only carry 5 people at most, I can't bring her along." Zhang Yan pondered for a moment and said, "This matter is simple. I have the dazzling Taoist robe given to me by the water country's Jin King, and it can avoid water, fire, and metal. Senior brother can just bring her along, I will go alone." Xie Zongyuan was quite moved, but he hesitated for a moment and said, "It's just that this way, senior brother Zhang will have to suffer." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Why do you say that? Senior brother and the others are just a step ahead of us." When Madame Chen heard that Zhang Yan gave up a seat, she wiped her tears and bowed, "Thank you, senior brother." Zhang Yan said lightly, Madam Chen need not be so courteous, I think you know what I am planning. Madam Chen nodded lightly and said, I know, senior brother, don't worry, I have been with Master in the past, I have been to the Devil's Cave many times, I dare not say that I am familiar with it, but I can at least tell the way. The Eye of the Sea only took a short 2 hours to open the Devil's Cave, so there was no time to waste. Since the decision was made, no one said anything more. After greeting Zhang Yan, they entered the Agarwood boat. Not long after, the boat turned into a yellow light and soared into the sky. With a bang, it drilled into the whirlpool and disappeared without a trace. At this time, there was no one else in the hall. Zhang Yan made a hand sign and the Taoist robe on his body flashed with a misty light, just like Feng Zhen and the others. Looking at the whirlpool that was spinning rapidly, he took a deep breath and jumped down. Chapter 83. The ocean current surged, and Zhang Yan floated along with the current for about an hour. Suddenly, a gentle light shone in front of him. This must be where the demonic cave was. If it wasn't for the fact that the direction wasn't right, he would have thought that it was the way back to the surface. When he was about to get close, the water around him suddenly sped up and wrapped around him. He felt a rumble as if a barrier had been broken, and he crashed into it along with the ocean current. The instant he entered, his body suddenly felt light, and the pressure that was originally pressing down on him disappeared. He hurriedly took a few steps to the side, avoiding the water that was rushing down. He stood in the air and looked around. There was light and wind here, and it was bright and vast. There was a large opening in the sky, and water poured in from above, sinking down. He adjusted his breathing slightly, and the rich spiritual energy almost rushed into his pores, instantly replenishing the spiritual energy that he had just consumed. Zhang Yan couldn't help but reveal a joyful expression. This was just the entrance, and the spirit qi in the demonic cave was already so dense. It was almost twice as dense as the spirit qi on the Spirit Page Island. If he went deeper, he couldn't imagine what it would be like. If he could calm down and cultivate, reaching the mystic light realm in a month wouldn't be a problem at all. He raised his head and looked into the distance, wanting to search for Xie Zongyuan and the others. However, he saw mountains and rivers in the distance. There were palaces in the mountains, and there were countless immortals riding cranes. He then heard Xie Zongyuan's voice, Senior Marshal Brother Zhang is here. Turning around, he saw Xie Zongyuan, Lu Tao, Qing'an, Zhao Zhen, and even Madam Chen greeting him with smiles on their faces. Zhang Yan shook his head and laughed, You're here already? Unfortunately, going too far is as bad as not going far enough. He formed a hand seal and the star sword ball suddenly leaped into the air. A misty blue brilliance shone and sword chi overflowed. With a few hissing sounds, the figures of these people twisted and disappeared. Not only that, but the scenery in the distance had changed as well. The fairyland-like scene from before had vanished without a trace in the blink of an eye, and a cavern had appeared. It was around 300 meters wide and extremely spacious, and there were milk pillars hanging upside down from the top of the cavern. Their reflections on the surface of the water below were like numerous sharp pillars. Not far to his left was a ravine with muddy water surging below. The seawater that rushed down flowed along this river and into a deep valley, forming a waterfall that splashed everywhere. It was an imposing waterfall. Zhang Yan stood in the air with a thoughtful look on his face. Those should be Huan Ma without a doubt. He didn't think that he would meet a demon that was even stronger than the Yin demons the moment he entered the cave. He heard that these demons could sense the desires of people and could create illusions to bewitch their prey. It seemed like it was true. Just now, when the thought of looking for these people arose in his mind, coupled with his obsession to pursue the great Tao, the devil immediately appeared. However, hearing about them was not as good as meeting them in person. The legends were a bit exaggerated. Not to mention other things, how could Zhao Zhen smile at others? This was really a big joke. It was obvious that the devil could not touch the depths of people's hearts and could only infect the shallow layer that was floating outside. If one was vigilant and prepared in advance, it would not be hard to deal with them. He looked around again, but did not find any traces of Xie Zongyuan and the others. He couldn't help but frown. Xie Zongyuan valued his promise and said that he would wait for him here, but he did not see him. Did something happen to him? Or did Fang Zhen and the others make a move? He looked around again and saw that there were many caves and ravines in front of him. He did not know where they led to. If he did not have a map, it would be easy to get lost. He took out the map from his sleeve and looked at it. There were 4 black dots near the entrance. On the surface, those were caves that could be used for cultivation. Why not go to those places first? Even if he couldn't find Xie Zongyuan and the others, there was no harm in staying there temporarily so that his cultivation wouldn't be delayed. After looking at it a few more times, he put away the map and flew towards the cave closest to him. After flying for a while, a mist suddenly drifted towards them from an unknown location. Everything before them was a vast expanse of whiteness. However, cultivators like Zhang Yan were able to see through thick mist. Thus, ordinary mist was clearly not affected. Not long after, a large mirror-like square stone appeared in front of him. It seemed to support the heavens and the earth, smooth and flawless. As Zhang Yan flew closer, his own appearance and the scenery around him were clearly reflected on it. Looking at it, he found it somewhat familiar. Wasn't it similar to the bluestone screen wall on Yingluo Island? At this moment, his own image on the stone wall suddenly moved. First, his muscles became thick, his facial features hardened, and his cheeks thickened. Then, it changed again. White hair slowly grew on his head, his flesh loosened, and his body was covered with wrinkles and spots. Then, his body gradually bent and aged. Finally, his flesh fell off and maggots crawled all over his body. Finally, he turned into a pile of white bones with 2 empty eyes. This must be the legendary stone of illumination. Rumor has it that the people standing here will be illuminated and their entire lives will change. Zhang Yan stood for a while and said to himself, "Although it is an illusion, if I do not live forever, this is what will happen to me. I must keep it in mind and be vigilant at all times." After saying that, he was about to detour around this place and continue to fly inside when he suddenly saw a dead body lying on a stone pillar. Judging from the clothes, it was actually the Taoist robe of the Yingtsang sect. Zhang Yan looked around vigilantly, then slowly floated over to the corpse. When he got close, he stretched out his hand and held up the person's chin. He raised the person's face a little and looked carefully. He discovered that it was one of the people who had come in with the Han clan disciple. He was about to investigate the cause of this person's death when he suddenly heard a voice coming from afar. He didn't know if it was a friend or foe. At this moment, it was too late to go elsewhere. Zhang Yan's eyes flashed, and he leaned to the side to hide in the depression of this strange stone. At this moment, he discovered that this corpse only had the upper body left. He didn't know where the lower body went. Moreover, it was empty of flesh and blood. Obviously, it had been sucked away. He frowned slightly. Eating flesh and blood, this was the legendary method of the walking devil. This kind of devil could already manifest its body and was in the process of changing from yin to yang. It was equivalent to a cultivator of the 2nd or 3rd tier of clear qi. Moreover, it was extremely fast and very difficult to deal with. The distant voice was getting closer and closer. He could distinguish that it was a man and a woman talking. Zhang Yan reached out and made a hand sign, using the qi restraining technique from the Billowing Cloud's secret book. A thin mist rose under his feet and mixed with the faint mist around him. The breath of a living person on his body was gradually melted into it. The distance between the two people was getting closer and closer. The man had a handsome face and wore a black Taoist robe. There was a large red blood cloud embroidered on his chest and shoulder. The contrast of black and red was extremely eye-catching. He held a red gourd in his hand. The other woman wore a white robe, but her abdomen was exposed. There was an umbilical plug made of green pearls embedded on it, but it tightly covered her bulging chest and shoulders. She also wore a white cloth skirt, and her hair was tied up in a bun. Her face was coquettish and her figure was graceful. The two of them were originally flying through the sky, but when they saw the corpse, they stopped and stood on a boulder not far away. The man reached out and pointed, and a faint shadow appeared in the air. It was fluttering, but the face seemed to be a little vague. One could faintly see that this person was exactly the same as the Chinsong school cultivator who died here. Junior sister, what do you think of my newly refined blood soul? The woman chuckled, and her eyes revealed a look of disdain. She said, Senior brother, this is also considered a blood soul. Not only is its form scattered and weak, it also doesn't have a spiritual sense. When released, it can at most fly 20 steps. Whether it can harm people or not is another question. The man laughed and said, Of course it can't compare to Junior sister's blood soul. But I haven't refined it for a long time. After a long time, it won't necessarily be weaker than yours. The woman sighed and said, Master is still the best. He only needed one blood soul to restrain the 3 disciples of the Chinsong school who were at the 3rd tier of the Clear Chi realm. Those few Chinsong school cultivators are also powerful, especially the one with the fire-breathing divine ring. It seems like he is the nemesis of our blood souls. Not only did he burn the evil soul that I painstakingly refined, but even Master's blood soul was damaged by him. I'm afraid it will take 1.5 years to condense before it can be used again. At this point, the man's tone could not hide the pain in his heart. The woman sneered and said, I recognize that magic treasure. This treasure is called the 5-fire divine weapon ring. It can break through all kinds of objects. If Master wasn't 1,000 miles away at that time, and only a blood soul came here, how could we let him take advantage of us? Hearing this, Zhang Yan's heart trembled. Could these 2 be disciples of the Blood Soul sect, one of the 6 great demon sects? But this is under the CI of Chinsong school. How did they come in? Could it be that there are other paths here? Xie Zongyuan and the others must have encountered these people and had no choice but to leave. Just how many of these Blood Soul sect disciples came here? At this time, he heard the woman say again, For now, we can let the disciples of Chinsong school jump around. In half a month, when Master subdues that true demon and rushes over, they won't be able to escape. The man said, I originally wanted to follow the branch of the little demon cave to search for the great demon cave. I didn't expect that this place would lead directly to the hinterland of Chinsong school. This is a pleasant surprise. We can't reveal this. In the future, it will be of great use. When we return, the elders will definitely reward us. The woman looked around and said, Senior brother Li and the others said that they would meet here in 6 hours. Why haven't we seen them yet? Could it be that he had encountered some troublesome devil? Less words. The man laughed and said, Senior brother Li's cultivation is profound. There is no need for us to worry. If you want to talk about troublesome demons, I'm afraid it's you, junior sister. The woman coquettishly rolled her eyes at him and said, Senior brother is making fun of me again. They were joking here, but Zhang Yan frowned. From the words of the 2 people, they should be Clear Chi disciples. But he didn't expect that Senior brother Li would come, and it seemed that there was more than one person. This was troublesome. If he waited for other Blood Soul sect disciples to arrive, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to escape even if he wanted to. He came here to cultivate. The other party originally didn't know of his existence, so he didn't want to clash with this person in advance. But now he had no choice but to act. Thinking of this, his eyes flashed with a cold light, and his killing intent gradually rose. Chapter 84. The conversation between the 2 Blood Soul sect cultivators had revealed a lot of information. The male cultivator's blood soul had been destroyed by Fang Zhen, but the female cultivator's strength hadn't been damaged. If they were to fight, they would have to kill the female cultivator first. Zhang Yan estimated where he and the other 2 were standing. Although the killing intent in his heart grew stronger, his expression became even calmer. He decided that once he attacked, even if he couldn't kill one of them, he would at least heavily injure them. Otherwise, the situation would become extremely passive. After sitting in silence for a moment, he silently turned around. A drop of gloomy heavy water drilled out from the top of his head and suddenly flew towards the male cultivator. He didn't expect this move to be successful. He only hoped to restrain the male cultivator for a moment. All of his attention was focused on the female cultivator. The male cultivator was talking happily when he suddenly caught a glimpse of a black light flying towards him from the corner of his eye. He couldn't help but be startled and subconsciously raised the gourd in his hand to block it. Bang! A tremendous force suddenly came from his arm, as if it could topple mountains and overturn seas. His chest felt stuffy and he was knocked down from the rock. Although this drop of gloomy heavy water seemed small, it was actually extremely heavy. He was clearly unprepared. Almost at the same time, a blue sword light slashed towards the female cultivator's neck. Her reaction wasn't slow either. Sensing that something was wrong, she slipped and allowed her body to fall. At that moment, a sense of foreboding suddenly rose in her heart. She saw another green light coming straight at her from the side. Its speed was so fast that she almost screamed in fear. Seeing that her head was about to be cut off, she twisted her waist in the air and rolled to the side to avoid being hit in a vital spot. However, one of her arms was cut off by the sharp edge of the divine Rui shuttle, causing blood to gush out like a fountain. The female cultivator let out a miserable groan. Enduring the pain with her remaining hand, she touched her belly and pulled out the umbilical plug. A blood-red figure flew out from her body. After pausing in the air, it rushed straight towards the place where Zhang Yan was hiding. Zhang Yan had already left his original hiding place. His figure was faintly discernible in the mist. Seeing the blood-red figure rush over, he raised his hand and recalled the star sword orb. At the same time, he split his attention and the divine Rui shuttle once again cut towards the female cultivator's neck. However, with the buffer just now, it wasn't so easy. The female cultivator's flexible body paused in the air and spun. Her skirt fluttered like a wheel, revealing her long white legs. The pointed embroidered shoes under her feet seemed to be a treasure. With a series of kicks, they actually blocked the divine Rui shuttle's attack. As for Zhang Yan, he faced the blood soul that was chasing after him. He formed a hand seal, and the sword pill circled in the air before slashing down. Unexpectedly, this strike actually pierced through the blood soul's body and did not have any effect. The blood soul continued to rush toward him. Zhang Yan's gaze froze. It was obvious that this blood soul had been refined for a long time. The blood essence was both real and illusory. It wasn't something that those demons with no consciousness could compare to. His sword pellet hadn't been imbued with any mysterious light yet, so he couldn't destroy such an object with one strike. Seeing that blood soul was getting closer and closer to him, he quickly retreated. Seeing this, the female cultivator's aura flared up. She kicked the divine Rui shuttle again and shouted, "Senior brother, let's work together to kill this person and take his essence. We'll split it in half." These few exchanges were completed in an extremely short period of time. At this time, the male cultivator finally recovered, but his face was a bit pale. Hearing the woman's call, he nodded and muttered an incantation. He shook the gourd in his hand, and a dark green ball of air suddenly sprayed out from it. It emitted a pungent smell as it rushed towards Zhang Yan. The female cultivator also urged her blood soul to charge forward in an attempt to pincer attack. A cold smile appeared on Zhang Yan's face. His retreating figure came to a halt, and a cloud-patterned vermilion brush appeared in his hand. He tossed it at Shuepe, who was charging at him, and said, "Go!" As if it had sensed something, the 3 chi on the tip of the Fangming brush surged. With just one brush on the blood soul, the rich color faded a bit. Its originally erratic movements also became sluggish, and it was no longer as fast as before. The blood soul was connected to the female cultivator's soul. Now that it was suddenly injured, her face turned pale. She covered her chest and retreated a few steps. She desperately formed hand seals with her hands, trying to recall the blood soul in a panic. On the other side, the male cultivator also desperately urged the ball of air to press forward, trying to stop Zhang Yan. How could Zhang Yan let the blood soul escape so easily? With a cold snort, he ignored the dark green cloud above his head and waved the Fangming brush again. In an instant, the essence in the blood soul was wiped out, and it directly drifted into the air. The female cultivator let out a mournful cry and spat out a mouthful of blood. Her body went limp and she fell to the ground. At this time, Zhang Yan only felt an evil aura, and he couldn't help but feel dizzy. He coldly snorted, shook his sleeve, and a pill fell into his palm. He then threw it into his mouth and put it under his tongue. His mind immediately became clear. Raising his head to look at the green cloud, he raised the destiny writing brush that had returned to his hand into the air. With just a brush, a large piece of the cloud of air was missing. After a few consecutive strokes, it became fragmented and dispersed in all directions. The male cultivator's expression changed greatly. Without a word, he picked up the female cultivator and flew into the sky to escape. Zhang Yan sneered. His feet paused and a cloud appeared. He also flew up and chased after them. Because he was carrying a person, the male cultivator's speed wasn't very fast. He quickly caught up to them and pointed his finger forward. A green light and a blue light flew out and chased after the person's back. The male cultivator hurriedly took out a piece of bone tile. With a wave of his hand, it transformed into a large shield with a green face and fangs, shielding his entire body within it. He didn't know where the shield came from, but it actually blocked the divine Rui shuttle and the stellar sword pellet. The sword orb and the divine Rui shuttle didn't stop and took turns to attack. For a time, the dense sounds were like a storm hitting the roof tiles, but they still couldn't break the bone shield. Seeing this, Zhang Yan narrowed his eyes and reached into his sleeve to touch the soul-calming inkstone. But after thinking for a moment, he gave up on this idea. If he took out the soul-calming inkstone, the male cultivator would only need to sacrifice the female cultivator to save his life. In this way, he would have one less burden, and he might really be able to let the other party escape. At this moment, he saw that the male cultivator's expression was calm. He was fighting and retreating, but he was still wandering around. He was clearly planning to buy time and wait for that senior martial brotherly to arrive. He couldn't help but sneer in his heart. "Do you think I can't do anything to you?" He spread his hands, and a beast-faced saber appeared in his hand out of thin air. With a loud shout, his speed almost doubled in an instant, and he arrived in front of the male cultivator in a very short time. Then he raised the divine weapon he obtained from Chu Chang and slashed it down at the bone shield. The male cultivator didn't expect Zhang Yan to use this move. But the beast-faced saber was coming at him fiercely, and he couldn't avoid it. He could only raise the bone shield to block it. With a kacha sound, the bone shield shattered on the spot. The male cultivator looked aghast. He casually threw the female cultivator away and turned to escape. The saber light flashed, and his left leg was cut off. He couldn't help but cry out in pain. His face twisted, and he couldn't help but stop. At this time, the third saber slashed at him. He didn't have time to dodge, and could only watch as the saber got closer and closer to his head. With a poochie sound, his whole body was split in two. Zhang Yan's saber shook, and with a turn, he crushed his origin spirit and slowly fell to the ground. After the female cultivator was thrown down from the sky, she was already half dead and couldn't move. Seeing Zhang Yan approaching her with an expressionless face, she panicked and said, "No, don't kill me. I'll agree to any condition you have." Zhang Yan didn't care. He walked closer and cut her in two at the waist. Then he waved his sleeve and casually scattered her origin spirit. With a dang sound, Zhang Yan heavily hit the ground with the hilt of the saber. He killed 2 people in a row, and there was not a trace of blood on the saber. He only felt a burst of satisfaction in his chest. No wonder so many cultivators like to walk the path of strength. With a divine weapon in hand, and with the protection of a superior Xian technique, there was no need to care about any magic treasures or flying swords. When facing an enemy, the saber in his hand could kill a person. It was really enjoyable. Originally, it wasn't that he didn't want to catch a person alive, but when he thought of the strange and inexplicable methods of the disciples of the devil doctrine, he didn't know whether the words he asked were true or not. If they had some method to track the soul, wouldn't that be self-defeating? It was better to just kill them with a saber. Listening to their conversation just now, it seemed like their Shizun would arrive in half a month. This person was actually able to release a blood soul from 1,000 miles away and was able to suppress several clear chi cultivators in one breath. His strength was truly terrifying. It was unknown what realm of expert he was. Zhang Yan thought that with his current cultivation he had no chance of winning against such an expert. It was better to find a safe place and increase his strength as soon as possible. The cultivation method recorded in the Tai Golden Book could only show its power after reaching the mystic light realm. If he could learn it as soon as possible, then he would have a fighting chance. Thinking to there, he took off the universe sleeve pouch from the two corpses. He didn't look at them anymore and used the evil salt to completely melt their bodies. Then he quickly flew towards a cave that was slightly further away from here according to the map. Not long after he left, a figure with a thick blood aura flashed. It was a man with a pair of eagle eyes, thin lips, and a large nose. His nose twitched strangely, and a confused expression appeared on his face. Then, it became gloomy. Afterward, more than 10 people arrived one after another. When they saw this person, they all bowed respectfully and said, "Greetings, Senior Brotherly." Senior Brotherly snorted, which was a sign of agreement. His gaze moved down and saw a disciple holding a person in his hand. He asked, "Who is this person?" The cultivator said, "This is a disciple of the Qinsong school that was captured. I came here especially to hand him over to Senior Brother." Senior Brother Li's body didn't move. A blood-colored profound light appeared from the top of his head and formed a big hand. It grabbed the person in the air and held him in front of his eyes. He said in a deep voice, "Let me ask you, how many people came to this demon cave? What are their names? Are there any good people?" If Zhang Yan was here, he would be able to recognize that the person who was captured was Zhao Jin. Facing Senior Brother Li's questioning, he smiled in disdain and said, "Look at your dead body. It's obvious that you cultivated the blood yuan art and made yourself neither human nor demon. Do you think you are qualified to interrogate your master Zhao? Let's have a good time." A trace of admiration flashed in Senior Brother Li's eyes. He said, "Good, you have guts. I will fulfill your wish." The blood-red hand flung Zhao Jin upwards, and then squeezed his entire body in the palm of its hand. A burst of bone-cracking sound was heard, and after a moment, the mysterious light retracted, and Zhao Jin's entire body disappeared. At this time, whether it was his flesh and blood, or his entire body's profound qi, everything had been completely absorbed into Senior Brother Li's body. Senior Brother Li's gaze seemed to contain a faint pressure. All the disciples on the scene couldn't help but lower their heads, not daring to meet his eyes. After a long while, he slowly opened his mouth and said, "Master is refining the true devil. If there's anything, this disciple will do. You and the others search around. If you see any Qinsong school disciple, quickly report to me." Chapter 85. Zhang Yan followed the map along the way and found many locations that were marked on the map. However, he was not satisfied with any of them. Either the locations were too obvious, or the demons were too powerful, and he did not dare to enter easily. Finally, he found a suitable cave in an inconspicuous ravine. This place was well hidden, and there were 2 exits in the front and back. There was also an underground river in the cave that led elsewhere. If anything happened, he could swim along the river and leave in time. After tidying up the cave, he estimated the time in his heart. Even though there was no sundial or hourglass, cultivators could sense the specific changes in time from the movement of the qi in their organs. It was about the end of the 2nd day after entering the Devil's Cave. This meant that in order to find this place to stay and cultivate, he had already spent an entire day. Sitting down on a stone platform that had been flattened, Zhang Yan finally had the time to look through the sleeves of the 2 Blood Soul sect disciples. Most of them were things that were commonly used by cultivators, and there was nothing eye-catching. However, there was a small bottle that contained pills that caught his attention. As Zhou Zhongju's disciple, he naturally had some knowledge. He could tell at a glance that this was a vitality essence pill. His expression showed that he had expected this. The Blood Soul sect had indeed secretly refined this kind of pill. This fragrant pill, which would make anyone want to swallow it, was actually refined using the essence of cultivators. Moreover, one could only refine 1 pill for every 5 cultivators killed. These 2 bottles of Qi blood essence pills were probably gathered by killing hundreds of cultivators. However, upon closer inspection, he could vaguely see that each pill had a faint trace of blood. Zhang Yan nodded. It seemed that these devil sect disciples did not have the guts to hunt down human cultivators. These pills were probably obtained after killing demon cultivators. Under the suppression of the top 10 sects, the 6 demonic sects had kept a low profile for hundreds of years. They did not dare to openly kill people or refine pills. They were even forbidden from cultivating many cruel and evil methods. Therefore, they got along quite well. Whenever the cultivation sects of the Donghua continent were mentioned, they would always refer to them as the 16 sections. In reality, it was not that the 6 demonic sects wanted to turn over a new leaf. It was because many methods required all kinds of strange demons to cultivate. Now, there were not that many demons for them to use. Disciples of the demonic sects often fought to capture demons. Therefore, whenever demons appeared, disciples of the demonic sects would come. They were even more active than the disciples of Shenmen. Therefore, these years, the demonic and celestial sects had maintained a balanced situation. But recently, Zhang Yan had heard a rumor in the sect that the demonic and celestial sects were coming. It was that more and more demons would appear in the Devil's Cave. The other 4 caves that no one knew where would appear one after another. So the sect decided to take the 3 and expand the sect to deal with the demonic and celestial sections. If this was true, then it would completely break the current balance in the Donghua continent. It was only a matter of time before the demonic and celestial sects would start killing each other. Zhang Yan smiled lightly. The demonic and celestial sects were also people's tribulations. The demonic and celestial sects were people's hearts. Wasn't it an opportunity for a cultivator like him? At that time, the ones who would really be worried would probably be the aristocratic families of Shenmen who were trying to maintain the status quo. Putting away the 2 sleeves, he sank his consciousness into his energy reserve. He looked inside at the drop of heavy Yin water that was floating quietly. He was filled with emotion. According to the Lan Yun secret manual, the more heavy Yin water there was, the more powerful it would be. Therefore, he did not think much of this drop of water. But he did not expect that when it hit the male cultivator of the Shuehua clan, it would be so powerful. If he had 2 or 3 drops at that time, he might have been able to kill him in one blow. The deeper he went into the Devil's Cave, the colder the underground river became. This was a good place to condense heavy Yin water. He believed that if he calmed down and refined it, he would be able to condense 8 to 10 drops of heavy Yin water in 2 months. At that time, even if he did not rely on magic treasures, it would be difficult for him to find a match among his peers. Unfortunately, with a great enemy in front of them, Zhang Yan did not think that the people of the Shuehua clan would give him time to cultivate in peace. In order to keep the secret that they could enter the Devil's Cave, they would definitely find a way to eradicate all the disciples of the Qinsong school here. It was even possible that they would send people to guard the exit of the CI on the 15th day. At that time, there would definitely be a conflict. Therefore, Zhang Yan had no choice but to do his best to increase his cultivation as soon as possible. Before cultivating, in order to avoid the Yin Devil's intrusion, he took out a calming pill from his sleeve and swallowed it. Then, he took out the gold element cloud sand. He threw it into the air. When it was about to fall, a stream of spiritual qi leaped out from the top of his head and held the cloud sand, suspending it 1 foot above his head. Zhang Yan sat on the stone platform and released the restraint on his mind, allowing the primordial spirit in his ocean of qi to rush towards the cloud sand. The abundant spiritual qi in the outside world was endless, inciting the spiritual opportunity continuously, causing the 81 spiritual qi to rotate slowly in his chest, continuously producing primordial spirit and sending it to the cloud sand. One cycle after another, the process of refining the cloud sand was not interrupted. If it was on the Spirit Page Island, how could it be done to this extent? It would only take 2 to 3 hours for the primordial spirit to be exhausted. If he wanted to continue, he would need to spend a few more days to breed it again. After a day, the cloud sand above his head gradually emitted a faint golden glow. However, it was flickering, like a weak tinder that could be extinguished at any time. Zhang Yan knew that this was the most crucial moment. so he did not dare to slack off. His spirit became extremely focused, and the golden glow became brighter and brighter. The cloud sand rotated faster and faster in the air, absorbing the primordial spirit faster and faster. In the end, the cloud sand exploded with a pop and became a pile of useless powder, scattering in all directions. The gold element in it was completely absorbed by the primordial spirit. A dazzling golden glow floated in the air, shining like the stars in the night sky. Zhang Yan opened his eyes and slowly exhaled a long breath. Then he retracted the 81 spiritual qi back into his chest. He extended a finger and placed it in front of him. The glow slowly floated down from the air and stopped on the tip of his finger. Suddenly, a bone-piercing sharp qi came over, and even his divine soul felt a faint prickling pain. He couldn't help but reveal a hint of joy in his eyes. Finally, a seed of profound light was formed. In the future, he just needed to keep using spells to strengthen it. When the light of this seed could shine out of his sea of qi, he would be able to step into the first level of the mystic light realm, initial enlightenment. He took out the star's sword orb and activated the seed of mysterious light to attach itself to it. As soon as he activated it, the sword orb instantly turned into a ray of light that expanded and expanded. When he activated it again, it pushed outwards and enveloped his entire body. Zhang Yan raised his head to take a look, then laughed out loud. Good. With this seed of profound light, I'll be able to form a sword sphere, and even its size and shape can be changed by my will. Furthermore, it can wrap around my corporeal body and fly, and its speed is several times faster than riding on the clouds. With this technique, even if I'm no match for a powerful cultivator, I'll still be able to escape far away. In the past, the method he used to control the sword orb was actually very rough. Most people could only use the true power of the sword orb after reaching the mystic light realm. Now, he could use some of the methods, and he had another life-saving method which greatly increased his confidence. This seed of profound light only took a day to condense, and it was extremely fast. Now that he was confident, he decided to refine all the cloud sand in one go. After adjusting his breathing, he took out the water-type cloud sand that he got from Gui Songyao and threw it into the air. He used his spirit qi to hold it and refined it again. In the following 2 days, he had condensed the water, wood, and fire elemental profound light seeds one by one. However, on the 3rd day, something strange happened. When he activated the 4 seeds of mystic light together, an earthy yellow seed of mystic light appeared in the center of his sea of qi. The other 4 seeds of mystic light were arranged according to the west gold, east wood, north water, and south fire. Zhang Yan found to his surprise that the last earth elemental seed of mystic light didn't need the cloud sand to form on its own. After thinking about it and combining it with the details of his cultivation, he understood. The 5 elements created each other. After the metal elemental seed was formed, he used the metal-type seed and the water-type seed formed faster. He then used the water-type seed to nourish the water-type seed and the water-type seed to strengthen the fire-type seed. Once the 4 elements were formed and used at the same time, the excess essence would have nowhere to go and would form the earth-type seed. Therefore, there was no need to use the cloud sand at all. No wonder the speed at which he refined the mystic seed became faster and faster. However, this was also because he was in a demonic cave and the essence was endless. If he was on the Spirit Page Island, he wouldn't be able to do this. Now that I've formed all 5, I'll be able to cultivate the 5-direction 5-elemental great mystic true light after I reach the mystic light realm. Thinking up to here, he suddenly saw a 5-colored light around his body. It was as if he could move mountains and drain oceans with just a slight movement. He couldn't help but smile and say, "You've come to disturb me again." It turned out that those Huanma had come again. This time, they felt his desire for great divine power, so they automatically showed him an illusion, luring him to fall into it. If his mind was bewitched, more and more devils would take advantage of him. In the end, his soul would be scattered, and he would become a walking corpse. Zhang Yan didn't have the heart to chase them away. One had to know that the deeper he went into the demonic cave, the more demons there were. There were countless demons and illusionary demons, and they were extremely annoying. In the beginning, he had tried to kill them, but he was already used to it. Most of the time, he just ignored them. After all, as long as his mind was unaffected, they couldn't do anything to him. Looking at the illusions around him, he was about to take out a mind-calming pill and eat it. However, at this moment, his heart moved and he put down the pill. He purposely thought about the scenes from his previous life, as well as the images of his friends and comrades that he had fought with. Sure enough, after being influenced by his thoughts, a few figures appeared in front of his eyes one after another. Looking at those familiar yet unfamiliar figures, Zhang Yan first sighed in disappointment. Then, with a carefree smile, he said, "Is this the flaw in my heart? Thank you all for letting me see myself clearly so that I won't be taken advantage of by this expert in the future." The instant he said this, he suddenly felt as if the gap in his mind was filled up by something. His soul and body became even closer, and there were no longer any flaws. When he looked up again, the illusions in front of him had already disappeared. Chapter 86. Seeing the cave become peaceful once more, Zhang Yan smiled faintly. With the help of the illusion world, he had cut off all his worries and cleared his thoughts. At this moment, his mind was clear, and the demons all retreated and didn't bother him anymore. However, he also understood that the demons were just temporarily unable to enter. In reality, they were still waiting on the side for a chance. As long as he showed a sliver of weakness, they would all attack him together. One had to know that the human heart was fickle. Not only was it easy to be bewitched by external objects, but as long as there was an obsession in one's heart, if one did not cultivate their Tao heart to perfection as time passed, other flaws would slowly appear. However, there were a lot less annoying things right now, which was an unexpected gain. Now that his Xian seed had formed, he only needed to cultivate according to the Draco E-metal technique and refine the metal and fire Xian lights. Then, he wouldn't need to be afraid of normal mystic light realm cultivators. More importantly, he could only use one treasure to work with the sword ball, but once he became a mystic light realm cultivator, he would be able to use two treasures at the same time, and his battle power would increase greatly. In the next few days, he sat in the cave and cultivated, and the metal and fire Xian lights in his body became stronger. One day, he came out of his meditation and calculated the time. He had already stayed here for 10 days. According to this speed, he would be able to reach the mystic light realm in half a month's time. The only thing he needed to worry about was that the master the two Blood Soul sect disciples talked about was about to arrive. At that time, he might not even be able to stay alive, let alone cultivate. It seemed like he would have to kill his way out of the demonic cave on the 15th day. Right as he was thinking, he heard some movement outside the cave, as if someone was approaching. Zhang Yan's eyebrows furrowed slightly. Could it be a disciple of the Blood Soul sect? He made a hand seal, and the star's sword pellet leaped above his head. Then, it transformed into a blue light of crystal sand that wrapped around his entire body. With a flash of light, a blue light flew out from the exit at the back of the cave. However, he didn't leave immediately. Instead, he circled around and found a higher place to see who had come here. Looking down, his eyebrows rose up and he thought, "It's this person?" There were a total of 4 people standing below. All of them were covered in blood and looked battered and exhausted, as if they had just gone through a tough battle. Meanwhile, the Han family disciple whom he'd met once in front of the Guardian Palace stood in the middle, but he was surrounded by the other 3. One of the middle-aged cultivators who seemed to be the leader said, "Han Ji, we are only following orders to take your life today. Don't blame us. If you are willing to stretch out your neck to be executed, we can fulfill your wish and let your origin spirit go." Han Ji revealed a forlorn smile. "Father really wants you to do it? I thought he would leave me here to fend for myself." He sighed again and said, "This is the devil's lair. Once my primordial spirit comes out, I'm afraid I'll be eaten by the devils. What difference does it make if I stay here or not? But there's still something I don't understand. Han Chuanda, can you tell me?" The middle-aged cultivator nodded expressionlessly. "Speak." Han Ji's expression was slightly agitated. "My father has never liked me since I was young. He even tried to find an excuse to kill me many times. Fortunately, my mother protected me many times, allowing me to escape with my life. I just don't understand. Why does he want to get rid of me? The middle-aged cultivator hesitated for a moment before saying, "At this point, I won't hide it from you anymore. Before you were born, I asked someone in the sect who was good at divination to divine your fate. The result of the divination was that you would harm your father. Do you understand now?" Hanji was startled. Then, a hint of anger flashed in his eyes. His body trembled as he said, "So it's because of this reason?" The middle-aged cultivator nodded affirmatively. "That's right." Hanji looked up to the sky and laughed bitterly. He pulled at the clothes in front of his chest and said sternly, "I, Hanji, swear to the heavens that if I don't die today, I will definitely destroy the Han family in the future." His shrill laughter echoed in the surroundings. When the middle-aged cultivator heard this, his expression darkened. He waved his hand and said, "Do it." Zhang Yan saw everything clearly from where he was. Although Hanji was a disciple of a large family, it seemed that he hadn't learned the true inheritance. He lacked the means to fight. Not long after, he was knocked to the ground. He could only rely on the green smoke coming from the incense burner to protect himself, gritting his teeth and holding on. After a few glances, he didn't want to interfere in such a personal grudge. Just as he was about to leave, Hanji's unwilling gaze flashed in his mind. After thinking for a moment, he said to himself, "Fine, I'll save you today." He took out a robe from the dead Blood Soul sect disciple's sleeve. First, he made some noise. Then, he formed a seal and used a sword pellet to lift the robe into the air. It floated faintly in the air a few times. As expected, this movement immediately attracted the attention of the people below. One of them cried out in alarm, "Not good, the people from Blood Soul sect are chasing us." The middle-aged cultivator looked back, and his expression instantly changed. He had been chased by the Blood Soul sect disciples all the way here, and he was already frightened. At this moment, how could he still care about taking Hanji's life? He hurriedly said, "Go." With a stomp of his foot, he hurriedly escaped with the other two. Seeing their fleeing figures, Zhang Yan smiled slightly and appeared. He slowly walked to Hanji and said, "Are you okay?" Hanji lay on the ground, still panting. He looked up and saw Zhang Yan walking over. He couldn't help being stunned and said, "Senior brother Zhang? Just now?" Then he seemed to think of something and struggled to stand up. He raised his hands and bowed deeply. "Thank you, senior brother, for saving my life." Zhang Yan accepted his bow calmly and said, "En? You know me?" Hanji looked at him with an excited expression and said, "Senior brother Zhang made Zhuang Bufan lose face last time. All the disciples of aristocratic families have heard about it. That day, you were with us in the Guardian Palace, so how could I not know you? I only hate that I was watched by a few servants that day and couldn't come and meet senior brother." Zhang Yan looked at him and saw a trace of admiration in his eyes. He shook his head and pointed to the cave not far away, saying, "This place is empty and eye-catching. Why don't senior brother follow me in? I still have a few things to ask senior brother Han." Hanji hurriedly took a step back and cupped his hands, saying, "I don't dare. If senior brother has any questions, I will tell you everything I know." Zhang Yan nodded and took the lead to walk forward. Hanji waited until Zhang Yan had walked past him before following behind. The two of them entered the cave and sat down. Zhang Yan casually tossed Han Li and Qi replenishing pill and asked, "Brother Han, did you see senior martial brother Xie Zongyuan and the others when you entered this devil cave?" Hearing Zhang Yan's question, Hanji put down the pill and sat up straight before answering, "I saw them. There were a few disciples of the Blood Soul sect here at that time, but after we defeated them, we separated. I heard that when you fought, the other party had a very powerful blood soul. Senior brother Han is a disciple of an aristocratic family. Do you know what realm this person is at?" Hanji thought seriously and said, "Other than its erratic body, this blood soul's face is like a real person's, so it must be a core transformation cultivator." At this moment, he revealed a look of relief. Fortunately, Senior brother Fangzhen had the 5-fire divine weapon ring with him at that time. That was how we managed to injure this blood soul. However, if he had sent a few more blood souls here, we would have no choice but to wait for death. Hearing this, Zhang Yan was surprised and said, "How can the blood soul of a core transformation cultivator be injured so easily?" Han Ji explained, "Senior martial brother Zhang, you don't have to be surprised. There are more than 100 blood souls of core formation cultivators, and there are good and bad ones among them. The powerful blood souls won't be released easily. Since they can travel thousands of miles, they must be used to scout or monitor the disciples." Zhang Yan thought for a while and sighed. "If that's the case, it looks like I can't cultivate here for long. On the 15th day, when the heavenly ocean eye opens, I'll kill my way out. However, if that's the case, I'll probably need a year and a half to reach the mystic light realm. I won't be able to make it to the battle of the 3 lakes." Hearing this, Han Ji didn't say anything. He only lowered his head as if he was thinking about something. After a long time, he raised his head and said slowly, "Just now, Mr. Zhang saved my life, and I can't repay you. If senior brother trusts me, I can try to help you cultivate for 2 months. Zhang Yan looked at him and asked curiously, "May I ask how senior brother Han can do it?" Han Ji raised his sleeve and took out a porcelain bottle. He said, "I heard that senior brother Zhang is a disciple of the Chancellor Zhou. You must recognize this." Zhang Yan took it, opened the bottle, and smelled it. His eyes focused, and he said uncertainly, "This is the mystic blood pill?" Han Ji nodded and said, "That's right. Senior brother has good eyes. This is the mystic blood pill that spiritual master Ru Huang of the Blood Soul sect made. 100 years ago, perfected master Ru Huang was a famous demonic cultivator in the Donghua continent. This person was unscrupulous and killed cultivators of the Shenmen sect at will. It was to the point where even the Shueshua sect had to expel him from the sect. However, this person was also a genius. At that time, he had already cultivated to the point where his blood soul and his soul could be combined and dispersed at will. As long as all his blood souls were not destroyed, it was impossible to kill him. Later, for some reason, he was surrounded and attacked by 6 spiritual masters of the East Hua continent. Only then was he completely eliminated. Han Ji pointed at the mysterious blood pill and said, "Back then, my ancestor also participated in this battle. This mysterious blood pill was obtained from the demon body. This pill is useless to us cultivators of the celestial sect of wonders, but to the disciples of the 6 great demon sects, it is a miraculous elixir. If he sees this elixir, he will immediately swallow it and refine it. Without a few months, he will not be able to complete it. In this way, we can buy at least 2 months for senior brother." Zhang Yan returned the mystic blood pill and said with a smile, "Senior brother Han's method is good, but how are you going to give this pill to that person? Even if you give it to him voluntarily, aren't you afraid that the other disciples of the Blood Soul sect will take it for themselves?" Han Ji's expression was a little sad. He said, "I was injured in my mother's womb and have a congenital deficiency. It is impossible for me to improve and cultivate Xian arts in this life. However, if I join the demon sect, I might have a chance to achieve enlightenment." After a pause, he looked at Zhang Yan and said, "And this mystic blood pill is the gift to me." Chapter 87. Hearing Han Ji's words, Zhang Yan looked at him and smiled. "Senior brother Han, you actually have the mysterious blood pill with you. Did you already have a plan? Or did you already know that there were Blood Soul sect disciples here?" Han Ji smiled bitterly. "Senior brother Zhang, you misunderstand. I have been stuck in my cultivation for 6 years. I know that I have no hope in this life, so I have long wanted to switch to demonic arts. Last year, I spent a lot of effort to obtain a demonic scripture. I originally planned to use this opportunity to enter the demonic cave to capture demons to cultivate and then consume this pill to increase my cultivation. I really did not expect that there would be Blood Soul sect disciples here." As if to increase his persuasiveness, he took out a book from his sleeve and held it with both hands, handing it to Zhang Yan. "Senior brother, look, this is it." Zhang Yan took a look and saw the words, Origin Seeking Scripture. He nodded, knowing that this was a cultivation technique equal to the clear breath scripture in the demonic sections. However, to practice this cultivation technique, he would have to repeat all his previous cultivation techniques. Zhang Yan could not help but look at Han Ji in a different light. After all, there were not many people who could be so ruthless as to waste 20 or 30 years of cultivation in one night. Han Ji's face showed a trace of bitterness. There are many Blood Soul sect disciples here. If I tell them my background, they will not make things too difficult for me. Zhang Yan thought about it and found that it was true. If Han Ji joined the Blood Soul sect, even if they did not accept him, they would not do anything to him for the time being. Firstly, the Han family was one of the 5 great families of Qinsong School. They had a special identity and could be used in many ways. Secondly, Han Ji was familiar with the inner workings of Qinsong School and even knew many secrets of large clans. This was not something that could be easily found out. Thirdly, he had a grudge against the Han family. He was willing to cripple his cultivation and even gave the mysterious blood pill. This karma was too great, and the person who accepted him would have to repay it. Moreover, taking a step back, even if Han Ji failed to become Zhang Yan's disciple, it was impossible for Zhang Yan not to accept the mysterious blood pill. Devil sect disciples would not be able to resist the temptation of a devil pill that could increase one's cultivation. This was extremely beneficial to Zhang Yan himself. If no core transformation cultivators came, Zhang Yan was confident that even if he was no match for them, he would be able to escape in time. However, he did not know how many Blood Soul sect disciples there were or how strong they were. Fortunately, the 15th of the month was approaching. If Fang Zhen, Xie Zongyuan, and the others wanted to escape, they would have to go to the entrance of the Devil's Cave. He believed that the disciples of the Blood Soul sect would definitely be prepared. The disciples that could be mobilized would definitely be present. At that time, the two sides would definitely have a fierce battle to the death. At that time, he could head over to investigate. If there weren't any almighty cultivators in the other party, then he could rest assured and cultivate here. If there were, then he could fight to the death, and whether or not he could charge out of the Devil Cave would depend on his own fortune. At this thought, Zhang Yan looked at Han Ji and said, "Senior Martial Brother Han, have you made up your mind?" Han Ji's expression was resolute as he said resolutely, "Senior Martial Brother Zhang, you were born a commoner, but you were able to enter the lower house and become a true disciple. This is something that only happens once in 100 years. Although I, Han Ji, am not as good as Senior Martial Brother, I still have the determination to pull myself together. If I don't try, how can I be satisfied?" At this moment, they heard a cold snort from outside the cave. I was wondering who it was. So it's Zhang Yan, you little thief, who is playing tricks behind the scenes. And Han Ji, you better obediently accept your death so that you don't cause any more trouble. As this voice rang out, a middle-aged cultivator with a long and narrow face strode into the cave. Han Ji suddenly stood up, his eyes filled with anger as he said, "Han Chuanda, it's you." Seeing this person, Zhang Yan did not move. There was not a hint of surprise on his face. He only sighed and said, "Since you've already left, why did you come back to die?" Hearing this, Han Chuanda laughed out loud and said sternly, "Zhang Yan, you dare to interfere in my Han clan's matters? No wonder Junior Martial Brother Feng said that you would definitely be an obstacle for my clan in the future. Looks like he was right. However, he was only half right. If you die here today, there will naturally be nothing else." Junior Martial Brother Feng? Zhang Yan's eyes narrowed, and a hint of light suddenly flashed across them. The sword pellet in his hand was full of vigor. Han Chuanda then turned to Han Ji and pointed at him, saying, "Han Ji, so that mysterious blood pill is in your hands. Was it stolen by that dead mother of yours? Coming from a small family, your hands are indeed dirty." Han Ji's eyes turned red as he pointed at him and roared, "Han Chuanda, you're just a servant that has been bestowed a surname. What right do you have to say that about me? You insulted my mother today, I swear I'll kill you." Having been exposed, Han Chuanda couldn't keep his face any longer. Seeing that the two of them were about to attack, he was alarmed. The cave was narrow, and he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to unleash his full power. Therefore, he simply leaned back and flew out of the cave, shouting, "Junior brothers, let's attack together. Kill these two and go back to claim the merit. The family head will naturally reward you handsomely." Two replies came from outside. When Zhang Yan and Han Ji walked out of the cave together, they found 3 people standing in the air. The person on the left held a wind thunder trident, and there seemed to be crackling lightning flashing across it. The person on the right held a heavy gold-painted wooden alms bowl. It did not seem to be an ordinary item either. As for Han Chuanda, he pulled out a long belt that looked like mist. As he swung it, it was as resplendent as the stars, dazzling. The reason the 3 of them were able to repeatedly escape the pursuit of the Blood Soul sect disciples was because they also had their own Dharma treasures. It was just that they had not used them against Han Ji earlier. Now that they were facing Zhang Yan, the title of a true disciple was still very intimidating. They immediately took out their Dharma treasures. When Han Ji saw this, his expression changed drastically. He said, "Senior Martial Brother Zhang, be careful. That's the Wind Thunder Trident, the Cloud-Filling Alms Bowl, and the Purple Star River's moon net." He then stared at Han Chuanda and said, "Han Chuanda, as expected, Auntie is behind all of this. Otherwise, where did you get the Purple Star River's moon net?" Han Chuanda laughed loudly again. He said, "Han Ji, did you only understand today? Let me tell you the truth. The reason your dead old mother was able to steal that cultivation technique was because of Madam's intention. After you cultivated the cultivation technique, Madam also ordered someone to secretly report this matter to Old Master. Only then did he order her to be beaten to death." When Han Ji heard this, his eyes almost popped out of their sockets. His blood and qi surged, and he was about to charge forward without a care for anything. However, his shoulder was pressed down by a hand. Turning back, he saw Zhang Yan shaking his head at him. He said, "Brother Han, leave first. I'll handle this." Han Ji immediately calmed down. He hesitated for a moment, then gritted his teeth and said, "Senior Martial Brother, I understand what you mean. My cultivation is weak, and I can't be of any help, but I can't be a burden to you either. I, Han Ji, am a man of character, and my words carry enormous weight. If I go back on my words, may the heavens and earth destroy me, and my soul perish." After saying that, he cupped his fists at Zhang Yan, turned around, and flew away without looking back. Trying to escape? Han Chuanda frowned. He waved his hand and said, "Junior Martial Brother Fu, go stop him. Don't let him escape." The cultivator holding the Tempest Trident responded. Just as he was about to make a move, he saw a dot of blue light flying through the air to stop him. He snorted and waved his trident. In an instant, a gust of black wind swept up from the ground, and there was a faint sound of green thunder exploding within it. Just as the sword ball was about to be blocked by the black wind, the blue light suddenly lengthened. Out of nowhere, the light that was the size of half a fist became a 3-foot-long light shuttle. Its speed also suddenly doubled, and before the black wind could reach him, it pierced through his neck. Then, taking advantage of the momentum, it circled around and instantly beheaded him like cutting tofu. The headless corpse fell from the sky and was caught by the black wind. With a crackling sound, the Dharma robe and the jade pendant that protected him were destroyed. Finally, the black wind swept up the corpse, and in the blink of an eye, the flesh and blood were completely wiped out, leaving no trace. The Tempest Trident, which had lost its owner's control, also fell from the sky and fell to the ground with a clatter. In just one move, Zhang Yan had killed one person, and the remaining 2 were shocked. "Junior Martial Brother, be careful. This Zhang Yan has already condensed the seed of mysterious light, and he can change the sword ball at will." Han Chuanda's face was solemn, but his back was drenched in cold sweat. If the sword ball had been aimed at him from the beginning, he would have been cut down by the sword. Moreover, if this Zhang Yan had borrowed the sword ball and wanted to escape, Han Chuanda wouldn't have been able to do anything about it. Seeing that there was no sound beside him for a long time, he turned his head and said anxiously, What are you waiting for? Hurry up and release the sand of glamour. The other cultivator immediately came back to his senses. He quickly opened the lid of the alms bowl, raised it high above his head, and poured it in front of him. In an instant, there was a rumbling sound, and like a river bursting its banks, clouds of crimson-colored sand tumbled out from the mouth of the alms bowl and surged towards Zhang Yan. Zhang Yan dodged into the air, but the sand seemed to have a mind of its own. It followed him into the air and let out a rumbling sound like the tide. A ferocious smile appeared on Han Chuanda's face. He didn't attack Zhang Yan from all sides. Instead, he dragged the Violet Star River's moon net in his hand and flew off in another direction. However, wherever he passed, the moon net would drag out a long streak of light that was over a meter wide. After going back and forth a few times, the sky and the earth were shrouded by the brilliant mist that seemed to be dotted with stars. Han Chuanda stood high in the air, and with a flick of his hand, another streak of mist appeared. He laughed loudly and said, "Zhang Yan, you have the sword ball in your hand, so you can turn into light and escape. I can't do anything to you, but now that the surroundings are filled with mist, it can be said to be an inescapable net. Let's see where you can escape to." Zhang Yan raised his head and saw that everywhere around him was shrouded in mist. The cultivator who fell with the sand of glamour had already arrived above his head at an extremely fast speed, sealing off his only escape route. Seeing the bright red cloud of sand pouring down from the sky, he sneered and took out a gray talisman. He threw it into the air and chanted a spell, saying, "Grow." The talisman instantly turned into a tortoise shell-like object about 4 feet in size in the air. There were cloud patterns, seal characters, mountains, rivers, fishes, and insects on its back. It stood on top of his head with its mouth facing downwards. A ray of light poured down and enveloped his entire body. When the rolling cloud of sand came near, it automatically parted to the sides as if it had encountered a rock. Zhang Yan took a step forward and knocked away the cloud. He sneered and said, "You want to stop me with just the likes of you?" Chapter 88. After Zhang Yan rushed out of the area shrouded by the clouds, he retracted the pure qi shield on his head and attached the mysterious light seed to the sword pellet. With a flash of light, he flashed out and once again arrived in the sky. He stopped and swung his sleeve, smashing the heart-striking hammer towards the head of the cultivator holding the cloud-filling alms bowl. The cultivator didn't expect that Zhang Yan, who was originally heavily surrounded, would actually appear in front of him in the blink of an eye. Seeing a big hammer emitting a red glow flying towards him, he immediately knew that it was a magic weapon. At this moment, he didn't have time to dodge, so he hurriedly used the cloud-filling alms bowl to block it. With a dang sound, a huge force came over, and the cloud-filling alms bowl in his hand flew out of his hand. A light flashed in Zhang Yan's eyes, and he pointed forward with his fingers. The star sword pellet followed closely behind to kill him. Seeing this, the cultivator was extremely shocked and shouted, "Senior brother." Before he finished speaking, a blue light had already flashed past his neck. Suddenly, his head was separated from his body, and he fell from the sky. Zhang Yan brushed past this person's corpse, and with a wave of his sleeve, he dispersed the original spirit. Then, he reached out to catch the fallen cloud-filling alms bowl and threw it into the universe cultivation pouch. With an indifferent expression, he said, "Your senior brother can't even protect himself, so how can he save you?" After saying that, he slowly raised his head and looked up. Although his eyes were calm, Han Chuanda, who was above, felt a chill in his heart. Even the hand that was holding the purple Star River moon net trembled slightly. Up until now, not even a moment had passed since the battle with Zhang Yan, and his side had already lost 2 people. He knew that the situation was not good, and immediately wanted to retreat. With a wave of the luo dai, a bright cloud scattered out as a cover, and he turned around to run. Looking at his back, Zhang Yan revealed a trace of ridicule at the corner of his mouth. He reached out and took the wind thunder trident that had fallen on the ground into his hand out of thin air. He also threw it into his sleeve, and only then did he use an escape light to chase all the way. His flying light was extremely fast, and in just a few breaths he had caught up. Han Chuanda groaned inwardly. Fighting against cultivators who used sword pellets was the most troublesome. If these cultivators had the help of a good sword pellet, they would be able to move extremely fast, coming and going as they pleased. On the other hand, if Han Chuanda was not careful, he would lose his life. How could he dare to turn his back on Zhang Yan? He hurriedly stopped moving and shook his belt with all his might, causing it to produce patches of multicolored clouds that protected his entire body. At this moment, he didn't seek to be meritorious, but he only sought to avoid making mistakes, and he only sought to preserve his life. When Zhang Yan got close, he retracted his sword light and revealed himself. When he saw the situation in front of him, he sneered and formed a hand seal. The stellar sword orb leaped into the air and slashed down from above. At the same time, the Rui spirit shuttle circled around under his control and rushed toward Han Chuanda's back. After repeatedly attacking the enemy's rear, he was already very adept at using the two weapons in his hands to attack from all angles. For a moment, two rays of light, one green and one blue, circled and chased Han Chuanda up and down, forcing him to use the Purple Star River and Moon Net to resist with all his might. However, even though he appeared to be in a very sorry state, regardless of whether it was the Divine Rui Shuttle or the Stellar Sword Orb, neither of them were able to cut through the dazzling bands of clouds. As soon as they came into contact with the bands of clouds, they would either be gently bounced off or become slightly sluggish. Han Chuanda shouted in the multicolored light, "Zhang Yan, you and I have no enmity, so why do you have to force me? If you let me go, I will naturally remember your benefits and repay you in the future. Otherwise, I will accompany you to the end today, and let's see what you can do to me." When Zhang Yan heard this, he couldn't help but laugh. "Do you think I can't do anything to you?" He stretched out his hand and summoned the Rui spirit shuttle back. Then he cast the mellow spirit shield above his head. In an instant, a ray of light fell down and enveloped his body. Then he took a step forward and collided with the thick multicolored clouds. With a boom, the multicolored clouds scattered in all directions, and the scene in front of him suddenly became empty, revealing Han Chuanda's horrified expression. Before he could react, a ray of blue light flashed by, and with a chi sound, his head flew high into the air, and he died on the spot. Zhang Yan waved his hand, and the stellar sword orb twisted, crushing Han Chuanda's original spirit and corpse into pieces. He made a hand seal and recalled the sword orb. Then he saw the Purple Star River and Moon Net slowly floating down from the sky. He took a few steps forward and grabbed it in his hand. He took a closer look and thought to himself, "This item is suitable for female cultivators. I have quite a few magic treasures now, so I might as well take them back and give them to fellow Taoist Luo." At this moment, he seemed to have sensed something and looked into the distance. There seemed to be light flashing there, and it was obvious that a cultivator was rushing over on a flying ship or some sort of magic treasure. His expression changed slightly, and he thought to himself, "I might as well see who it is before making a fuss." He pressed down the cloud and looked left and right. He saw a pile of rocks not far in front of him, and his eyes lit up. He took a few steps forward and hid. Not long after, a flying ship arrived in the sky above the place, and there were two Blood Soul sect disciples in black robes standing on it. One of them let out a and said, "I saw treasure lights soaring into the sky just now, and there were faint sounds of killing. Why is it gone now that I'm close to it?" The other person observed the surroundings and sniffed, and said in a deep voice, "The spiritual vigor here is chaotic, and there is a lot of blood smell. There must be people fighting here, and they might not have gone far." Just as the two of them were talking, a muffled sound came from the sky, and they could not help but turn their heads to look. They saw a scarlet blood cloud soaring into the sky from afar, and it was like the glow of the setting sun. Even half of the sky was dyed red, and it was extremely eye-catching. The first person said in shock, "It's our Blood Soul sect's Yen Xuanyun. I'm afraid that one of the senior brothers intercepted the Qinsong school disciples and called us over to help." The other person said excitedly, "They actually used a Xuanyun, looks like they caught many big fish. Good. If we can catch all the Qinsong school disciples here, it will save us the trouble of searching around." "You're right, let's go." The two of them turned the flying ship, turned around, and rushed towards the place where the red light came from. In a flash, they disappeared without a trace. Seeing the two of them leave, Zhang Yan came out from his hiding place. He looked up at the thick layer of blood in the distance, and his face looked thoughtful. After a while, a sharp light shot out of his eyes, and he raised his hand to summon the sword pill. In a flash, he also flew in that direction. He was extremely fast, and after about an hour, he saw figures flashing in the sky in front of him, and blood light flew everywhere. He carefully approached them and found a relatively high spot to hide himself. When he looked at the battlefield again, he discovered that there were actually 8 Blood Soul Sect disciples surrounding Fang Zhen's group of 5. The two sides seemed to be in a stalemate. Although the Blood Soul Sect disciples had the advantage in numbers, they only released their own blood souls to wander around the surroundings. They were not in a hurry to make a move. After a while, a few more people came out, and the number of people quickly exceeded 10. Once the Xuanyun came out, their fellow sect members that were scattered all over the place started to rush over. Feng Ming looked at the increasing number of Blood Soul Sect disciples and said anxiously, "Senior brother Feng, can we attack now?" Fang Zhen's expression was relaxed, and he said, "What's the rush? Let's wait a bit longer. When a few more Blood Soul Sect disciples arrive, we'll kill them all at once." Feng Ming said worriedly, "I'm just afraid that senior brother Xie and the others won't be able to hold on." Fang Zhen glanced at him and said unhappily, "Xie Zongyuan is a disciple of the Xie family, and he naturally has methods to protect himself. Why do you need to worry? Furthermore, our plan this time is for them to lure away that profound light realm cultivator while we kill the rest of the Blood Soul Sect disciples. If there are too few people, won't our original plan fail? Guard them well and kill a few more demonic path scoundrels. When we get back, I'll ask Master for a reward." Feng Ming hesitated for a moment before saying, "Senior brother Feng, we're all in the demonic cave, and we're bound together. We're all disciples of the same sect, and even if we don't get along normally, we can't do anything here. If we don't attack now, I'm afraid that if that profound light realm cultivator of the Blood Soul Sect leaves senior brother Xie behind and comes here, we won't be able to escape." Fang Zhen snorted, but he seemed to have listened to Feng Ming's words. He reluctantly took out a golden ring that was 3 feet long, and with a cold smile on his face, he threw it at a Blood Soul Sect disciple who was holding a banner. When the Blood Soul Sect disciple saw this, he immediately used the banner in his hand to block it, but someone next to him exclaimed, "Don't." Before the disciple could react, a flaming man covered in purple flames suddenly sprang out from the golden ring. As if it had a mind of its own, it pounced on the disciple and wrapped him up. The disciple spun on the spot and exploded with a loud bang. The disciple didn't even have time to scream before he was turned into a pile of ashes. Fang Zhen snorted coldly and raised his hand to call the golden ring back. A Blood Soul Sect disciple yelled, "Senior brothers, be careful. This is the 5-fire divine weapon ring, and it's the bane of evil. Master's blood soul was destroyed by this thing last time." As soon as these words were spoken, the surrounding Blood Soul Sect disciples all took a few steps back and spread out in a circle. Clearly, they were rather fearful of this Dharma treasure. A mocking expression appeared on Fang Zhen's face as he laughed. "Since you know how powerful the treasure in my hand is, then obediently accept your death." He picked up the golden ring and threw it at another Blood Soul Sect disciple. At this moment, a red light suddenly flew over from afar and blocked the path of the 5-fire divine weapon ring. With a clang, the golden ring was shaken back. Fang Zhen couldn't help but be surprised. He looked up and saw a cultivator in blood-red clothes standing in the field. This person's hair was disheveled and his face was handsome. However, his nose was hooked, his eyes were gloomy, and there was not a trace of blood on his face. When the Blood Soul Sect disciples saw this, they all knelt on the ground and said respectfully, "Greetings, Master." Zhang Yan, who was watching the battle from afar, was shocked when he heard this. Could this be the core formation cultivator? But when he looked carefully, he found that although this person looked no different from an ordinary person, his body was erratic, like a soul. He immediately relaxed. At first, Fang Zhen's expression changed drastically. But after a few glances, he laughed wildly towards the sky. I was wondering who it was. So it's a shadow form blood soul. If you're here with your real body, I'll definitely die. But now, you're not enough to scare me. What? Have you forgotten what you suffered last time? Chapter 89. The blood-robed cultivator placed his hands behind his back, as if he didn't care about Fang Zhen's words. He only glanced at Fang Zhen and said, "Junior, I have other matters to attend to, so I won't argue with you. In 5 days, the CI of Qinsong School will reopen. I hope you will be able to leave alive at that time." With that, he glanced at where Zhang Yan was hiding and waved his hand behind him. Immediately, one of the Blood Soul sect disciples shouted in a loud voice, "Master has ordered, retreat." The surrounding Blood Soul sect disciples didn't hesitate. They all put up their weapons and left. As for the blood-clothed cultivator, he stood there without moving. When there were no more Blood Soul sect disciples present, he looked deeply in Zhang Yan's direction. With a flash of blood-red light, he disappeared without a trace. Fang Zhen secretly heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that the Blood Soul had finally left. Although he said it was easy, this Blood Soul sect was able to push back the 5 fire divine weapons with one attack. It was much stronger than the Blood Soul sect he had met last time. If they fought, he wouldn't have any chance of winning. It would be best if they both stopped fighting. Zhang Yan, who was standing high up, stared at the blood-robed cultivator from the very beginning. Even when that person looked over, Zhang Yan didn't retreat. He had done this on purpose. The reason he did this was because he felt that the other side clearly had the advantage and there was no reason for them to retreat so easily. There had to be some other reason. Maybe the blood-robed cultivator was just bluffing. Therefore, he purposely provoked him and wanted to see how the other side would react. Only when the blood-robed cultivator retreated did he become more certain of his guess. Seeing the Blood Soul sect cultivators all retreat, he shook his head regretfully. What a pity! If the person standing below wasn't Fang Zhen but Xie Zongyuan, he would definitely suggest that he attack immediately. He would definitely be able to heavily injure these Blood Soul sect disciples. Thinking up to there, he thought that the situation today was because he wasn't strong enough. He could see the flaws but couldn't do anything. He wasn't arrogant enough to think that he could fight against more than 10 Blood Soul sect disciples by himself. However, if he was a mystic light realm cultivator, why would he need to worry so much? With a wave of his hand, he was able to annihilate all of them here. From this, it could be seen that one's own strength was the foundation of everything. Feng Ming had a slightly hesitant expression on his face. He glanced at Fang Zhen and said, "Senior brother Fang, since the members of Blood Soul sect have retreated, why don't we go receive senior brother Xie first, and we can discuss our next course of action." Fang Zhen snorted, his face filled with dissatisfaction as he nodded reluctantly, "That's the only way." After leading his disciples for a distance of 50 kilometers, the blood-red-robed cultivator stopped on a high earthen slope, seemingly waiting for someone. Not long after, a blood-red rainbow streaked across the sky and landed on the ground, revealing senior brother Li's figure. However, he didn't come alone. Instead, he brought 2 people with him, one on his left and one on his right. He arrived in front of the blood-robed cultivator, knelt down and said, "Master, I didn't disappoint you. I've brought you here." A faint look of joy appeared on the blood-red-robed cultivator's face. He nodded his head, and his gaze landed on a young cultivator behind senior brother Li. He said happily, "You are Han Ji from the Yunlang Han family?" Han Ji hurriedly went up and bowed respectfully. He lowered his head and said, "Reporting to senior, this one is indeed Han Ji." The blood-clothed cultivator looked at him again and said with a smile, "Good, you're indeed a talented person. My Blood Soul sect has always been open to the public. Since you're interested in becoming my disciple, I naturally won't reject you." A look of joy appeared on Han Ji's face. He immediately knelt on the ground and said, "Disciple greets master." Seeing that Han Ji's expression wasn't forced at all, he nodded in satisfaction and said, "No need to be so polite. Get up. I'll take you in as an in-name disciple for now." Once you see me in person, we'll go through the formal ceremony. What do you think? Han Ji said. It's all up to Master. The person standing to the right of senior brother Li said proudly, Master, junior brother Han and I hit it off at first sight. When I learned that he wanted to join our sect and was willing to give us a mysterious blood pill, I immediately sent him a message without delay. Senior brother Li frowned and scolded, Li Weiman, Master is asking a question. Who are you to interrupt? Step down. Li Weiman smiled carelessly, as if he didn't care about the scolding at all. The blood-red-robed cultivator waved his hand and smiled. It's fine. I've done a good deed for the people. You don't have to be too harsh on me. Senior brother Li hurriedly lowered his head and said, Yes. You're here. The blood-red-robed cultivator waved at senior brother Li. The latter understood and walked a few steps closer. He said in a low voice, Master, what instructions do you have? The blood-red-robed cultivator said in a low voice, You're to leave tonight and personally escort your junior brother Han to my place. This matter is very important. There can't be any mistakes. Do you understand? Li Weiman pondered for a moment and said awkwardly, If I'm not there, I'm afraid the other senior brothers and junior brothers won't be able to resist the Chinsong School's cultivators. The blood-red-robed cultivator said indifferently, It's fine. They've been frightened by me and won't have the guts to come again. Just don't provoke them for the next few days. You just have to send your junior brother Han here. When the time comes, I'll send someone to receive you. Just try to go back before the 15th day. Remember? Li Weiman hurriedly took a step back and bowed. I will obey Master's orders. The blood-red-robed cultivator made a sound of, oh. Then he sighed inexplicably. The 5-fire divine weapon ring is indeed a profound artifact. You'll have to be careful if you encounter it in the future. After saying this, his originally solid figure began to sway unsteadily. Starting from his feet, it slowly began to dissipate, followed by his knees, abdomen, chest, and head. He followed in the footsteps of the cultivator until his entire body completely disappeared. It turned out that Hua Kai had forcefully taken on the 5-fire divine weapon ring. Although he had managed to block it, the spirit in his blood soul had already been corroded by the imperial fire. Hua Kai had only been bluffing in front of Fang Zhen. If Fang Zhen had hardened his heart at that time and fought to the death, he might have been able to kill all the Blood Soul sect disciples present. Seeing this, Li Weiman's expression did not change. It was as if he had already expected the scene before him. Li Weiman walked to his side and stood still. He said proudly, How is it? Big brother, I've done a great service this time, right? Li Weiman did not comment. He only said, Weiman, I'm here. You must block the group of Chinsong School disciples. Not a single one of them must escape. Otherwise, all the junior brothers from before would have died in vain. Li Weiman patted his chest. Big brother, don't worry. We have a total of 18 people. Excluding the ones we killed, there are at most 10 Chinsong School disciples. How can we let him pass? Li Weiman thought about it. He felt that even if Fang Zhen had the 5-fire divine weapon ring in hand, it shouldn't be a big problem to block the Chinsong School disciples for a while. Moreover, he should be able to return in time. He then reminded, Don't be careless. Be careful. Li Weiman repeatedly agreed. Big brother, hurry and take junior brother Han on his way. Don't let Master wait. Li Weiman nodded. He said to Han Ji, Junior brother, I'm sorry. A blood-colored light appeared from the top of his head and wrapped around him and Han Ji. They flew into the air and disappeared in a flash after confirming their location. At the same time, Fang Zhen's group, Xie Zongyuan, and the others had regrouped in a hidden cave in the demonic sect. Xie Zongyuan welcomed them in, and after they all sat down, he said, Senior Martial Brother Fang, that mystic light realm cultivator was chasing after us, but he suddenly left for some reason. I thought that he saw through our plan and was worried about you guys, but I can relax now that I see that you guys are fine. Lu Tao, who was sitting next to him, glanced at Fang Zhen and said, How many disciples of the Blood Soul sect did Senior Brother Fang kill in this battle? Seeing Fang Zhen's expression become a little ugly, Feng Ming hurriedly clasped his hands and said, Senior brothers, do you remember that extremely powerful blood soul when you first entered the demonic sect? Xie Zhongyan said solemnly, how could I not remember? Luckily, senior brother Fong used the 5-fire divine weapon ring to force us back, which was why we were able to escape. He frowned and said, what, did you meet this person again? Fong Ming said, senior brother Fong has already lured the Blood Soul sect disciples to a place, but unfortunately, this person has sent another Blood Soul, and this one seems to be something even the 5-fire divine weapon ring can do nothing to, so we can only. He let out a heavy sigh when he said that. Xie Zhongyuan was a reasonable person, so there was no blame on his face. He only said, this can't be blamed on senior brother Fong. It is already fortunate that we were able to escape. He then looked at Fong Zhen and clasped his hands. Senior brother Fong, this way, if we want to escape the demonic sect in the next 15 days, there will be a fierce battle. We are on the same boat now, so we should advance and retreat together. How about we put aside our past grudges for now? Fong Zhen snorted and clasped his hands in return. I, Fong Zhen, am not a petty person. Since senior brother Xie has said so, then we can plan what to do in the demonic sect. Xie Zhongyuan and Lu Tao behind him exchanged a look. They knew that Fong Zhen had not let go of the grudge in his heart, but Xie Zhongyuan didn't care. At the very least, they had the same goal in escaping the demonic sect. As for returning to Qinsong School, as a disciple of the Xie clan, why should he care what Fong Zhen thought? At this time, a voice came from outside the cave. Senior brothers, you are determined to break out of the demonic sect together. As a disciple of Qinsong School, I will fight with you all. Xie Zhongyuan heard this and suddenly stood up. He said with surprise, Senior brother Zhang, is that you? Behind him, Lu Tao, Qing'an, and Madame Chen also stood up. Fong Zhen's expression changed slightly. Zhang Yan. There was a whoosh and a blue light flashed in. When the light dissipated, Zhang Yan's figure appeared. He smiled and cupped his hands in greeting. It's been 10 years since we parted, and now it's time to meet senior brothers again. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.